Chapter 1606. It was precisely because he understood the military strength of the Southern Ming Empire very well that he stood up against King Shiping when the three provincial kings invited King Wu Nan to join Yunnan Manor. He even asked the emperor to issue an imperial edict stating that the three provinces had been the land of the Southern Ming Empire since ancient times and no one had the right to make decisions about it. Unfortunately, no one listened to his suggestion at that time. Because of this, there were many people who secretly laughed at his courage. As the Minister of War of the Southern Ming, he should be very courageous. How could he achieve great things if he was so careful? Not only the ordinary officials, even Zhou Xian didn't agree with this decision. In his opinion, this was a chance to kill Yang Qindong. If he issued an edict, what would he do if Yang Qindong didn't go to Yunnan Manor? Wouldn't he be helping his opponent? However, he never thought that Zhu Huiyun was so incompetent and Mu Bin was such a waste. They actually allowed Yang Qindong to succeed. As a result, the relationship between the Southern Ming and the Five-Star Army was so tense that they had to use weapons. If he knew this would happen, it would be great if Zhu Xian listened to Kuang Ye's words. At least that way Yang Qindong would lose an excuse to go to war with the Southern Ming. This way the righteousness would be on his side. If Yang Qindong still dared to send troops, he could use the excuse of punishing the thief to announce to the world and lead everyone to attack Bugnam of Gozhouzian. But now the righteousness was in the other party's hands. Now that the other party sent troops, it became a righteous move. This made Zhu Xian very difficult. Only then did he want to ask Kuang Yi, the Minister of War, if he had a better idea. When his name was called, Kuang Yi, who originally didn't want to speak, could only hold his board and walk out of the line. He lowered his head and said, "Emperor, in this official's opinion, the Five-Star Army now holds the righteousness. If we fight with them over Guangxi, it is unreasonable." Unreasonable? The entire Southern Ming is my world. Doesn't Guangxi belong to the Southern Ming? How is it unreasonable? Although he knew that Kuang Yi was speaking the truth, his words still caused Zhu Xian to be quite dissatisfied. Exactly. All lands under the heavens belong to the emperor. All lands by the emperor's shores belong to the emperor. His Majesty is only taking back Guangxi's administrative authority. How could it be unreasonable? Your Excellency, is your buttocks crooked? The Minister of Works, Wei Luo, took the initiative to stand up and criticize Kuang Yi. In the past, the Southern Ming dynasty's Minister of Works was Jiang Yuan. However, this person had once harmed Yang Qindong's 7th Madam, Su Manor's family. After the order was given, the members of the Security Bureau hidden in the Southern Ming dynasty gathered evidence of corruption and made their move. They announced it to the world and caused Zhu Xian to be shaken. In the end, they were killed and their family members were exiled. After avenging the 7th Madam, Wei Luo took over the position. Ever since he took over the position, he had been living a life of suffocation. There was no other reason other than his lack of experience. In addition, the Ministry of Works had not built much over the years and had spent a lot of money, but most of the firearms produced were not up to standard. Because of this matter, the Minister of War, Kuang Yi, had complained to him many times. Now that he finally had a chance to use this opportunity, how could he give up on it? After hearing Wei Luo's words, Kuang Yi did not say anything. Instead, he shook his head and bowed to Zhu Xian before returning to his original position. He would not lower himself to the same level as Wei Luo. Wei Luo had relied on flattery and gifts to obtain the position of Minister of Works. In reality, he did not have any ability at all. It was precisely because there were too many people like him who did not care about politics that the Southern Ming dynasty had not improved much over the years. Kuang Yi did not say anything, but his attitude was clearly expressed. Zhu Xian thought to himself, "Are we really going to give up on Guangxi?" With this thought, he could not help but shake his head. Then his gaze fell on the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zue. As the Minister of Revenue, he was in charge of money. Wherever the Southern Ming dynasty needed money, he would not be able to do so. Zhu Xian naturally would not ask about small matters. Now that he had asked, it proved that the money used was not small. It had to be said that over the years, the Southern Ming dynasty's Ministry of Revenue still had some savings. Not to mention other things, just the amount of money obtained from selling those people to Xianxia was enough to fill up the national treasury for a time. It was because of this that the Southern Ming dynasty's army continued to expand over the years, reaching an astonishing number of 2.5 million soldiers. After being called by the emperor, Wang Zue stood up with a board in his hand. Reporting to the emperor, the Ministry of Revenue has some savings. In an emergency we can mobilize 15 million taels. Good, transfer the money, transfer the troops and transfer the provisions. Finally hearing this good news, Zhou Xian immediately became spirited. His voice also became louder. This meant that war was about to begin. When the other officials heard this, their faces all changed. Everyone knew that once the war machine was activated, the money would be spent like water. As long as the operation was good, there was a great chance of getting money. Some people couldn't help but blush when they thought of the benefits they could earn. However, there were some people who thought even further. Were they about to start a war with the 5-star army? If they really fought, what were their chances of winning? If they won, then everything would be fine. However, what if they lost? It wouldn't be wrong to say that this was a kingdom war. If that was the case, then there was no way out if they lost. Many people unconsciously thought of the Battle of Tumu Castle. At that time, the great Ming dynasty was almost destroyed because of a war. At that time, Zhou Xian was leading the army. An army of over 200,000 soldiers could not even defeat 60,000 soldiers. Only a few years had passed. Now that they had to fight with the 5-star army, what were their chances of winning? Zhou Xian, who was sitting on the dragon throne, saw the changes in the officials' faces. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. How could he ever walk out from the shadow of that battle? If it was possible, why would he be willing to fight? It was just that the situation was like this. He couldn't just watch the 5-star army occupy 3 provinces and continue to advance to devour the southern Ming dynasty. If that was the case, then it would be better to fight. Naturally, when Zhou Xian asked about the money, it didn't mean that he was prepared for war. He was just preparing for a rainy day. As long as there was a slight possibility, he still didn't want a war to happen. My beloved officials, there is no need to panic. We are just making some preparations in advance. If Bugnam of Gojoseon is tactful and only occupies 3 provinces, then this war won't happen. In order to calm the officials, Zhou Xian spoke his thoughts. Whether it was the Great Ming dynasty or the Song dynasty, they all had a very common characteristic. They emphasized culture and suppressed martial arts. They liked to be ostriches. They buried their heads deep and only cared about their own lives. They only cared about the peaceful songs and dances in front of them. In their eyes, other than themselves, everyone else was barbaric. Everyone else was uncivilized and didn't know how to be polite. For example, fighting and killing was one of the signs of uncivilized behavior. As long as they could live a peaceful life, why would they care if other people were living in an abyss of suffering? This couldn't be said to be the mentality of all the officials, but the majority of them thought this way. Now that they heard Zhou Xian's words, everyone agreed. I believe that Bugnam of Gojoseon is also a reasonable person. After obtaining 3 provinces, he should be satisfied. This war won't happen. Your Majesty is wise. Your Majesty is wise. A group of officials reacted and scrambled to speak. In the imperial court, it was as if the emperor and his officials were of one mind. In this imperial court meeting, they decided to give up 3 provinces as the price to enter into peace talks with Bugnam of Gojoseon. Of course, the Ministry of Revenue and Ministry of War also began to prepare for war. After all, if the 5-star army took an inch and wanted a mile, then there was no way out. They could only fight. Zhou Xian was obviously not very satisfied with this result, so he left with a gloomy face. The most unlucky one was the Minister of Rights, Xia Chong. He was elected by the officials to be in charge of negotiating with Wu Nan. When he thought of left Assistant Minister Zhou Xian going to 3 provinces and now no one knew whether he was alive or dead, he felt that the road ahead was a little bleak. The officials left one by one. Some shook their heads and sighed while others had gloomy faces. However, there was one person who seemed to have a lot on his mind. After he walked out of the main hall, he didn't go to his office. Instead, he went straight to the eastern district of Nanjing's capital. He felt that he should discuss with that person what happened in the imperial court today. Previously, Bugnam of Gojoseon was trapped in Yunnan Manor because of this person's idea. Perhaps he had a better way to let Yang Chendong enter the capital alone. He looked around and didn't find anyone paying attention to him. He couldn't help but quicken his pace. If there was any progress in the work of the embroidered uniform guard in these years, the biggest credit would be to the person he was going to meet. In order to persuade this person to work for him, he didn't know how much effort he had put in and how many years of planning. Finally, it was time for him to reap the rewards. If this person was discovered at this moment, then he would become the biggest sinner of the embroidered uniform guard. Zhou Xian, after Zhou Xian arrived at Nanjing's capital and became the South Emperor, publicly rebelled from Baiming. He was currently the factory manager of the embroidered uniform guard. In the entire group of eunuchs, his position was second only to the eunuch Qian Xingbao. Zhou Xian, who was never willing to bow down to others, used the position of the embroidered uniform guard to do a lot of work. For example, even eunuch Qian didn't know the inside story of the Xianxia traitor that he instigated. Other than him, only the Emperor Zhou Xian knew. This was a little different from history, but it didn't deviate from the original. Zhou Xian was a person who liked to spoil eunuchs. The first one was Wang Zhen, who almost lost his life in the wooden castle. Now that he was the South Ming Emperor, he quickly increased his trust in the group of eunuchs. It was because of this that Zhou Xian continued to work hard. In his opinion, as a eunuch, only when he reached Wang Zhen's position would he not have lived in vain. When he left the palace, he had already changed his clothes. Walking in the crowd, he looked like an ordinary person, turning and turning as he rushed to the East District. When it was about dark, he returned to the palace and secretly met with Zhou Xian. As for what he said after meeting the emperor, even the head of the eunuchs, Qian Xingbao, didn't know. Chapter 1607. The next morning, the Southern Ming Empire's Minister of Rites, Xia and his entourage left the capital. Outside the southern gate, many court officials came to see them off. With the anticipation of the crowd, Xia stopped in front of the city gate for about an hour before reorganizing his troops and setting off. When the entourage was far away from the capital, Minister Xia let out a long sigh and muttered to himself, "You all don't want to fight with the five-star army, but do you think this old man wants to?" However, the Southern Ming Empire's previous actions have already incurred the wrath of Bugnam of Gojoseon. How could it be so easy to make them stop fighting at this point? After saying this, Xia sighed again and slowly closed his eyes. No matter what the road ahead was, since the emperor had named him and he held the position of Minister of Rites, he had to make this trip. As for whether or not he could complete the emperor's orders, he didn't have much confidence. Just as Xia and his entourage were heading towards Guangxi, the five-star army led by the world's first cavalry army and the 2nd Cold Front Division had already attacked the city. After taking down Xi City, they separately attacked Qinyuan Prefecture and Liuzhou Prefecture, all the way to Jinan Prefecture in front of Guangxi. This place would become the final barrier in front of Nanning Prefecture. Once this place was taken, Nanning Prefecture would be in front of them. At that time, the ownership of Guangxi would be decided. In Nanning Prefecture, the newly appointed Guangxi Administrative Minister Bai Kuan was like an ant on a hot pan, pacing back and forth in the main hall. From time to time he would stop and look outside, waiting for the latest instructions from the Southern Ming Empire. Unfortunately, each time he looked, he was met with disappointment. Even now, the Southern Ming Empire still hadn't given him an explanation. This made Bai Kuan not know what to do. Defend Nanning Prefecture? To tell the truth, he didn't have much confidence. News had already come from the front lines that the five-star army's cannons were very powerful. Fortified cities were like paper in front of them. Even if they wanted to defend, they wouldn't be able to. But should he retreat? The position of Nanning was extremely important. Without an imperial order, if he dared to retreat, the consequences that awaited him would be even more severe than dying on the battlefield. He was stuck between a rock and a hard place every day. Sometimes he would even reflect on whether surrendering to the Southern Ming Empire was the right choice. If he had known earlier, he would have surrendered to the five-star army. At the very least, he wouldn't be in such a difficult situation now. Reporting. Bai Kuan, who was sighing in his residence, suddenly heard a sound behind him. He reflexively turned around and saw the messenger entering the residence. His face immediately lit up and he asked anxiously, "Is there a decree from the Southern Ming dynasty?" Reporting to General, that's not the case. It's news from the Suppressing Peace Prefecture. The Suppressing Peace Prefecture's garrison general has surrendered and the five-star army has already entered the city. The messenger's voice carried a hint of fear. But all messengers preferred to report good news instead of bad news. Most of the time, it was not uncommon for soldiers who reported bad news to be beheaded on the spot. What? Hearing that the suppressing peace prefecture's garrison general had surrendered, Bai Kun only felt a wave of dizziness. He had thought that with the strength of the 5-star army, the suppressing peace prefecture would not be able to stop them. However, they should at least fight a battle and waste some of their strength and delay some time. However, who would have thought that they would surrender without even fighting? Didn't this mean that there were no more obstacles between them and the 5-star army in the Nanning prefecture? Without any obstacles, this meant that the 5-star army's next target would be him. Right now he didn't even know whether to fight or retreat. How could this not give him a headache? Seeing that Bai Kun didn't have any other orders, the messenger hurriedly left, leaving the general standing alone in the main hall. No one knew what he was thinking. Suppressing peace prefecture. Having taken down the city without shedding a drop of blood, Tianhu, Xiaofeng and the others were in a good mood. Although they had been through hundreds of battles, they had absolute confidence in taking down Guangxi. However, this time, Yang Qindong's mission was to take down the city without destroying its original appearance as much as possible. This was somewhat of a test. The great Ming dynasty could not be compared to other places. Although some small countries or regions had some cities, the city walls were not very tall. Some of them were even just symbolic. Attacking that place would only require a cannon blast or even a cavalry charge, and it would be easy to take it down. Because of this, the difficulty of the mission increased. However, the good thing was that the Guangxi Southern Ming army did not have a strong will to resist. Along the way they did not encounter any large resistance. Often when the cannon blasted, the city would quickly change hands. Now that they had reached the suppressing peace prefecture, they had directly surrendered. This gave Tianhu, Xiaofeng and the others more confidence in completing the mission. The two of them also discussed and decided to rest in the suppressing peace prefecture for a day. The day after tomorrow they would set off for Nanning prefecture. There might be a big battle there. Nanjing capital. The streets were surging with people and all kinds of shouts could be heard on both sides of the street. It was very lively. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a prosperous time. They were not affected by the war in Guangxi at all. It was as if they were people from two different worlds. This was naturally affected by the lack of information, but at the same time, it was also because the imperial court had deliberately suppressed the relevant information. After all, once the people's thoughts were in chaos, it would only cause more headaches for the imperial court. In a restaurant called Wangye Restaurant, the waiter was walking quickly. From time to time he would shout out such as what the guests at a certain table had ordered, or how much silver had been rewarded by a certain guest's luxurious mansion. To be able to open a restaurant that could accommodate hundreds of tables in the bustling city of Jingdu, it proved that the owner was not ordinary. In fact, the owner's strength was indeed not ordinary. His surname was Yang and his name was Wuda. Yang, Bugnam of Gojosian, Yang Qindong's fourth brother, and the current representative of Xianxia's business in southern Ming. Regardless of which identity he had, it was enough to shock people and they could not help but look up to him. Over the years, after following his sixth brother out of Baiming's capital, Yang had settled down in southern Ming. At first he only developed in Fujian, but after entering Jingdu he could not stop and stopped there. Yang, who held the power to decide the trade with Xianxia and had a large amount of goods, had always been someone that southern Ming merchants wanted to curry favor with. Often, in order to obtain more goods, these merchants would rack their brains to think of ways to curry favor with Yang. As time passed, Yang could not help but feel a sense of complacency. Today one of southern Ming's biggest merchants, Lu Yuan, was inviting Yang to a banquet at Wangkuju. The Lu family had been doing business for generations, and although they were not as rich as a country, they were not far from it. As the leader of southern Ming's merchants, Lu Yuan had always had his eyes on the top of his head. It was extremely difficult for ordinary merchants to meet him. But now he was actually standing at the entrance of Wangkuju as if he was waiting for someone. Those who knew Lu Yuan couldn't help but be shocked. They wondered what kind of person could make the Lu family's clan head bow down to someone else. Could it be that it was a high official in the imperial court? Regardless of whether it was Baiming or southern Ming, there was one thing in common, and that was that the status of merchants was extremely low. This was especially so in front of scholars and officials. This was a reflection of the development of social status, so it was no wonder that people would think this way. However, when a merchant's business reached a certain scale, it was inevitable that they would come into contact with some people in the imperial court. This was especially so for someone like Lu Yuan. Even if he was greeting a high official in the imperial court, he would at least be an assistant minister. Only a third-rank official or above would be able to make him act like this. Just as many diners were thinking about who the guest was, Yang appeared. He was accompanied by two people who looked like servants. He held a folding fan in his hand as he appeared at the entrance of Wang Kuju. "Master Xianxia, you're finally here." As soon as he saw Yang appear, the originally arrogant Lu Yuan hurriedly went forward to greet him. He was like a dog that had seen its master, constantly wagging his tail. When the diners saw that it was Yang who had arrived, they immediately understood. That's right, Yang had such qualifications. Just based on the fact that he was Wu Nan Wang's fourth brother, based on the fact that he held the right to purchase Yang's items, it was normal for Lu Yuan to lower his stance like this. Considering that the Wuxia restaurant was Yang's private property, most of the people who asked Yang for help would choose to treat them to a meal here. So everything was normal. Facing Lu Yuan's lowering of his head, Yang only nodded reservedly. He was already used to this kind of thing. To put it bluntly, Yang's existence was the god of wealth for merchants. Often, whoever his goods were slightly more inclined to, that person would be able to earn a lot more. In comparison, being a little more respectful was nothing. "Brother Lu, let's go," Yang said with a smile. Even though Lu Yuan was more than 10 years older than him and was the host of the banquet, Yang still went up first. But Yang still took the lead and walked up to the 4th floor of Wuxia restaurant, which was also the place where he ate. There was only one private room on the entire 4th floor. From there, one could see a small part of Nanjing City in the distance. Please. Lu Yuan did not show the slightest bit of dissatisfaction when Yang went up first. On the contrary, he bent his waist like a lackey and extended his hands to make an inviting gesture. Yang walked in front and Lu Yuan followed behind. They went straight to the 4th floor. Along the way, many diners hurriedly stood up to greet them. To these guests who were willing to patronize his restaurant, Yang gave them face with a smile. It was considered a greeting. Lu Yuan brought 2 servants and Yang brought 2 servants. The group of 6 was about to pass through the main hall and turn the corner on the 1st floor. Seeing that they had already reached the stairs and were about to go up to the 2nd floor, a few people happened to come down. They were not tall and were even a little short. The group of 5 lowered their heads and went straight down. Chapter 1608. Suddenly there were 5 people in front of them. One of the servants who came with Yang instinctively walked to the front and put on a defensive posture. His main task was to protect the safety of the 4th master. He absolutely couldn't allow any accidental discovery. Yang only frowned at the servant's rush and didn't say anything. He didn't think that there would be anyone who would harm him in his own restaurant. Moreover, he came to this banquet on a whim. Not many people knew about it in advance. Just as Yang frowned before his eyebrows could completely relax, a sword light suddenly flashed. The servant's body was already soaked in blood. Soon after, a line of blood spurted out from his neck and the blood splattered about a foot high. The red blood was reflected in Yang's eyes. "Ah!" Yang screamed and his body retreated as if out of instinct. Another figure also rushed out with this shout. He leaped in front of Yang and used his body to block the second sword attack. Once again blood spurted out. The remaining servants' clothes were also stained with blood. The opponent's movements were too fast. Although the 2 servants who followed him immediately rushed out and lost their lives, they still couldn't block the opponent's third sword attack. Moreover, the sword light flashed and directly slashed in front of Yang's neck. The folding fan in his hand blocked in front of his chest. Several gusts of wind flew out and rushed towards the incoming assassin. This was one of Yang's life-saving methods, the power of the folding fan. This wasn't an ordinary folding fan. It was a folding fan with hidden mechanisms. It could shoot out dozens of steel needles at the same time. If the distance was too close, these steel needles could penetrate the body and kill the assassin. The steel needles moved and flew through the air, piercing into the assassin who was completely unprepared. Immediately, the assassin's body trembled. Next, white foam came out of his mouth. Then with a plop he fell down between the stairs. And all of this happened in the blink of an eye. After a short period of time, Lu Yuan finally reacted and shouted, "Save him!" Then he rushed towards Yang. The folding fan in his hand was his last life-saving weapon. Now that he had used it, Yang had no other way out. Lu Yuan was about to pounce on him, and out of instinct he wanted to turn around and elbow him. But Lu Yuan's voice rang out, "Fourth Master, nothing must happen to you. Nothing must happen to you." After saying that, Lu Yuan exerted force and pressed Yang under his body. It was also at this moment that a sword intent slashed down and struck him in the back. Under the powerful force, a trace of blood seeped out of the corner of Lu Yuan's mouth. Lu Yuan was using his life to protect Yang. It turned out that in such a short period of time, the two attendants brought by Lu Yuan were also killed by the assassin. If Lu Yuan had not used his life to block the sword, the one who would have been injured would have been Yang himself. None of the assassinations were effective, and the most likely attack was blocked by Lu Yuan's life. The 5 assassins became angry. They were all ninjas and the best among the ninjas. Assassination was as simple as drinking water and eating in their eyes. But now, under the surprise attack, they didn't succeed. They couldn't help but feel a little anxious. The 5 of them shouted and jumped straight down the stairs. Because of the narrow stairs, they made the first move, which also made Yang lose his vigilance. Because of this, 2 of his attendants died, and the 2 attendants brought by Lu Yuan also died. But also because of the narrow stairs, the ninjas' range of movement was limited, so they couldn't rush to Yang who was rolling down the stairs. Yang and Lu Yuan hugged each other, and under the impact of the powerful sword, they rolled down the stairs so they temporarily escaped the assassination of the ninjas. As soon as they landed, more than a dozen people rushed to the stairs. They were all the staff of Wuxia restaurant. Some of them were waiters, some of them were shopkeepers, and even some of them were kitchen staff. Wuxia restaurant was Yang's property, so the people here were naturally his staff. Now that the boss was in trouble, everyone naturally chose to rush out. Of course, this wasn't because Yang was good to everyone, making them grateful to him and willing to face death. It was because everyone knew Yang's identity. If he died here today and they didn't save him, they were afraid that Bugnam of Gojoseon would know about this matter, and they would face a life worse than death. More than a dozen people rushed up and blocked the 5 ninjas. Yang finally had time to stand up from the ground. Looking at Lu Yuan in his arms, his face was pale and his body was cold due to excessive bleeding. He couldn't help but shout, Brother Lu, hold on. Yang was still concerned about Lu Yuan's injuries. In front of the stairs, there were already corpses and the smell of blood spread out. There were only a dozen people. Although they were tough, they were just relying on brute force. How could they be a match for 5 ninjas? Fortunately, as time passed, more and more people rushed up. To be able to become a famous restaurant in Kyoto, there were a lot of staff here. More and more people rushed out and finally blocked the ninjas' surprise attack. Finally, someone took Lu Yuan from Yang's hands, but it seemed that his situation wasn't good. Yang, who was finally able to get up, reached out his hand and took out a Type 54 pistol from his waist. He opened the safety and fired at the 5 ninjas who were fighting. This time he almost died in the hands of the other party, which made him scared and angry at the same time. Bang bang bang, gunshots rang out. Other than the first shot that suddenly injured a ninja, the other shots all missed. Not only did they not injure the ninja, but they also killed some of the restaurant staff. Bastard. Looking at the Type 54 pistol that had no more bullets, Yang was a little regretful. He had this pistol with him for a long time, but he was too lazy to practice shooting. Now that it was time to use it, he regretted not working hard. Gunshots rang out and the entire Wuxia restaurant's hall became chaotic. Some diners ran out of the restaurant as fast as they could. In their view, it was too dangerous to stay here. Although Yang was in trouble, it was a great opportunity for many people. If they really saved Yang here, the benefits would be beyond their imagination. But if they wanted to do something, they first had to look at their own strength. If they rushed to save someone, they would only lose their life. Then no one was willing to do it. The hall became more chaotic because of the people fleeing in panic. At this time, Yang loaded another magazine into the Type 54 pistol, but at this moment he couldn't calm down at all. He knew his own shooting skills, especially when he saw his own people. This time more and more people died, and those 5 assassins, the one who was shot had already retreated. Other than bandaging his wound, the other 4 assassins were still intact. He felt that the situation was serious. Yang Yang had a feeling that these assassins were determined to kill him. Inside the restaurant, at least the waiters were able to put up a fight. But once he left the restaurant, then no one would be able to help him. Perhaps a single sword strike would be enough to make him fall to the ground and turn him into a corpse. Everything happened too fast. From the time when the servants around him were injured to now when the people in the restaurant ran away, it was not even half an incense stick's worth of time. It would take at least half an incense stick's worth of time for the nearby soldiers to arrive. The question was, could they hold on until then? Yang Yang's heart was very anxious, and the assassins were also very anxious. The more time passed, the more unfavorable it would be for them. Originally, they thought that this mission would be very easy to complete, especially after they learned in advance that Yang Yang would appear here. They were even more confident. If everything went smoothly, perhaps as long as they met face to face, they could complete the mission of assassinating the target. But who would have thought that until now the target was still safe and sound? Although the opponents in front of them were getting fewer and fewer, who knew if other accidents would suddenly appear? We will block them here, you go and kill the target. The leader of the 5 assassins saw that if this dragged on, it was very likely that an accident would happen, so he changed his sword style and slashed out fiercely. He relied on his excessive momentum to force the waiters in front of him to retreat. Taking advantage of this time, one of the jonins in front of him shouted loudly and jumped into the air. He actually jumped over the waiters and jumped to the periphery, and also came in front of Yang Yang, who was holding a gun. What are you doing? Seeing the assassin jump in front of him, Yang Yang instinctively raised his gun and aimed at the other party. The black muzzle of the gun was pointed at him, and the jonin couldn't help but tremble as he stood in place. As a former member of the Xianxia, ninjas were very clear about the power of the flintlock. Especially the Xianxia's flintlock, as long as one was hit by it, there would be very few good results. Now that the muzzle was in front of him, it would be a lie to say that he was not nervous at all. But when he noticed that Yang Yang's whole arm was constantly shaking because of nervousness, the jonin felt that the opportunity was coming, and suddenly his body swayed to the right, then turned to the left and rushed over. As soon as the jonin moved, Yang Yang also moved, and the muzzle of the gun was pointed to the right and fired. When the gunshot sounded, he found that the assassin was rushing over from the left. He was shocked and no longer cared about anything else. He waved his hand and threw out the 54 style. It must be said that Yang Yang also practiced some martial arts. At that time, a gentleman had 6 skills, and he was born in the Yang family, so he was taught by a famous teacher. Unfortunately, he hasn't exercised for a long time, and coupled with the rich life, his body was not as flexible as before. After the 54 style was thrown out, it only made the opponent stop for less than half a breath of time. Then he held the sword and rushed over. The sword wind whistled through the air and went straight to Yang Yang's neck. Chapter 1609. My life is over. After Yang Yang shouted, he closed his eyes. At this moment he could even feel the piercing pain of the sword wind slicing through his throat. Dang! A crisp sound rang out. It was the sound of weapons clashing against each other. Then there was a gust of cold wind, followed by the sound of more weapons clashing. After waiting for a moment, Yang Yang found that he was not dead. He opened his eyes and saw Yang Lu blocking in front of him. At this moment, there was a scratch on Yang Lu's right arm and blood was flowing out from it. Needless to say, at the critical moment, Yang Lu must have rushed out to help him avoid the fatal blow. But because of this, Yang Lu was also injured. Who is Yang Lu? He is one of the 5 servants of the Bugnam of Gozhouxian Yang Qindong, and his skills were quite good. But later, because of some mistakes, he was sent to the southern Ming kingdom by Yang Qindong, and was responsible for managing the intelligence here. In the eyes of many people, he was already a marginalized person. Because of this, he used to drink to drown his sorrows for a period of time, and his physical condition was far worse than before. Because of this, the moment Yang Lu fought, he was injured. How is it? Buzi, are you okay? Yang Yang hurriedly came forward and asked with a trace of concern. Fourth Master, this little one is fine. Yang Lu smiled at Yang Yang, and then his face flashed with a ruthless expression. He said to the butler Yang Ying and the others who followed him, all of you go together and kill these assassins. Right, try to leave them alive. After Yang Lu shouted angrily, he turned around and knelt down in front of Yang Yang. Fourth Master, this little one just received the news and rushed over. I have frightened you. It's okay, you came at the right time. Yang also sighed in fear. Fortunately, Yang Lu came in time. It seems that Xiaxia's intelligence network is indeed very powerful. He can even get information about an assassination attempt. Yang Lu came with dozens of experts from the intelligence department's action department. Most importantly, these operatives were all holding pistols in their hands, which was very impressive. No matter how powerful you are, can you win against a gun? Wouldn't it be 1 in 1,000 to be selected to join the operations division of the intelligence department? 1 in 100, 1 in a dozen, 1 in a dozen, 1 in a flower, 1 in a flower. Naturally, their marksmanship wasn't as bad as Yang's. When they fired their pistols, 4 of the 5 Jonins were killed on the spot. The other one was only shot in the body because they wanted to keep him alive, but his vital parts were fine. Capture him alive and ask him who ordered them to do this. Seeing that the situation was settled, Yang Lu heaved a sigh of relief and shouted loudly, "Don't come over." The last remaining Jonin waved the ninja sword in his hand and placed it on his neck, threatening to kill himself if anyone came over. This action really made the members of the operations department stand rooted to the ground, not knowing what to do. Haha, you can save him once, but can you save him 10 times or even 100 times? Let me tell you, since we have set him as our target, we will definitely kill him. Today we were just careless. It won't be long before you die. I will wait for you on the ground, huh? After a burst of laughter and clamor, the sharp ninja sword in the Jonin's hand instantly cut his throat, and with a spurt of blood he fell to the ground with a plop. When the members of the operations department walked forward, they found that the Jonin was no longer breathing. 5 assassins died just like that without a single survivor. All of this was seen by Yang's eyes. He should be happy, but he didn't know why. At this moment he didn't feel happy at all. Only the words that some people said before they died flashed in his mind. You can save him once, but can you save him 10 times or even 100 times? Yang couldn't understand who hated him to the bone and wanted to kill him. But he knew that this place was no longer safe. In other words, the entire Nanjing prefecture was no longer safe. Before killing the person behind the scenes, he must leave here and find an absolutely safe place. Then where would it be safer? Without much thought, the name of Resin City appeared in his mind. Yang suddenly grabbed Yang Lu's arm and said, "See, immediately arrange something. I want to leave here. I want to go back to Resin City." "Oh right, you have to personally bring people to escort me." "This is no problem. But shouldn't we report it to the young master?" Yang Lu revealed a difficult expression. "No need, I'm his 4th brother. When we reach Resin City I will tell him." Yang shook his head. He didn't want to stay here for a moment longer. He just wanted to hurry back to Resin City, otherwise he wouldn't even dare to close his eyes and sleep. "All right." Yang Lu could only say reluctantly. After all, Yang was the young master's 4th brother, and was also one of his own masters. As a servant he could only obey unconditionally. Yang left, and Yang Lu brought over 100 members of the intelligence department to protect him. They went straight to Fujian. There was a ship specially sent to Resin City. It was also the nearest way home. Although he had left, what he left behind for the Southern Ming dynasty was a mess. There was no need to talk about Yang Lu's identity. Luckily he didn't suffer any injuries, otherwise he really didn't know how to explain it to Bugnam of Gojoseon. The current situation was already a little tense, and the development of the situation had greatly exceeded the expectations of the Southern Ming. If a war really broke out now, how could the Southern Ming that wasn't fully prepared be their opponent? Perhaps a war would break out one day, but it definitely wasn't now. Hence, Yang Lu's problem at this time was indeed a headache. From the report of the genie guards, the 5 assassins were all dead, no one was alive. The Southern Ming imperial court was even more depressed. It would be better if they caught the real culprit. It would be best if they could interrogate the mastermind. That way the Southern Ming would be able to remove themselves from this problem. However, the problem now was that the assassins were all dead, and the identity of the culprit had become a mystery. If this pot of shit wasn't handled properly, the Southern Ming imperial court would have to bear the responsibility. Investigate carefully and find out who did it. The Southern Ming imperial court isn't afraid of trouble, but we definitely won't be casually used by others. Ingzong Zhuqian gave the order, and the genie guards in the city immediately moved. However, facing an extremely well-organized assassin organization, how could it be so easy to find the mastermind? In the end, after investigating, they still couldn't find any clues. Yang Qindong also received a telegram from the Security Bureau 4 hours after the incident. Someone wants to harm fourth brother? Yang Qindong suddenly stood up, his entire face terrifyingly cold. Dragons had reverse scales, and one of Yang Qindong's reverse scales was his family and loved ones. Investigate the ins and outs of this matter clearly. I want to know all the details of this matter. Yang Qindong was angry. The pitiful one was the head of the Security Bureau, Yang San. After he received the order, he immediately decided to set off for the Nanjing Imperial Court. However, before he left, he reported a clue that he had just found to Yang Qindong. Young master, we have a new clue about the transmitter of 9826. Nanning Imperial Court. Bai Kun stood on top of the city gate tower, wearing a suit of armor. In the past 2 days, after countless psychological struggles, he finally made a decision before he received the Southern Ming Imperial Court's decree. That was to fight against the 5-star army. There was a high possibility that he would lose this battle, but he still had to do it. Since he had already surrendered to the Southern Ming Imperial Court, he could only walk this path to the end. He had once surrendered to the Southern Ming Imperial Court from the 3 provinces army. If he surrendered to the 5-star army from the Southern Ming Imperial Court, wouldn't he be like Lu Bu, a slave of 3 surnames? Think about it, Lu Bu was the #1 general during the 3 Kingdoms era. But what good end did he have at that time, and what good reputation did he have today? No. Just the sign of a slave of 3 surnames nailed him to the pillar of shame, never to rise again. With such a living example in front of him, Bai Kun didn't want to be such a person. Of course, the most important thing that prompted him to make such a decision was that the day after he surrendered to the Southern Ming Imperial Court and met Zhou Xian, his family was forced to be sent to the capital of the Southern Ming Imperial Court. Gloriously, it was to protect his family and let them go to the capital to enjoy life. However, no one could see that this was simply treating his family as hostages. For the safety of his family, Bai Kun could only do this. After making the decision, all the soldiers in the Nanning Imperial Court were gathered by him. In order to increase the chances of defending the city, he even ordered people to gather all the men, women, and children in the city. He was already prepared to perish together. This time, even if he lost, he wanted to label the 5-star army as immoral. As for himself, as long as his family was safe, he didn't care if he died. It had to be said that Bai Kun's decision was very bold. Especially the action of gathering all the men, women, and children in the city onto the city gate tower. It could be said to be a combination of despicable and shameless. This was because the moment the 5-star army attacked the other cities, using the cannons, it was inevitable that ordinary civilians would be blasted to death. Didn't Bugnam of Gojoseon say that he wanted to lead all the Han people to the peak of the world and let them live a good life? Alright, I'll place the people on the city gate tower and see if you dare to fire. If you do, you'll be slapping your own face. At that time, who will believe you? Yi Zichen thought. All right. Amidst the weeping and crying, the city gate tower was filled with mournful wails. The civilians didn't know what kind of impact they would have on the city gate tower. They only knew that now that they were pushed to the front lines, they would become cannon fodder if they didn't do well. Because of this, they all cursed Bai Kun's 8 generations of ancestors in their hearts. Chapter 16:10. However, this kind of greeting was obviously useless. How could a person who wasn't even afraid of death be afraid of being cursed by others? Finally, while Bai Kun was waiting, the 5-star army began to appear below the city wall. They're finally here. Let's see what you're going to do. Bai Kun was wearing a full body armor. After looking from afar, he hid behind the civilians. He decided not to show his face and not give the 5-star army a chance to question and scold him. Otherwise, if he was really questioned, it wouldn't look good for him. Are they preparing for a battle? Tian Hu rode forward on his horse. When he took out his binoculars and looked, he couldn't help but curse when he put it down. This Bai Kun is really a bastard. That's right, he is indeed a bastard. However, it will be difficult for us to do next. Division Commander Xiao Feng also put down his binoculars. His face was as black as the bottom of a pot. They couldn't be blamed for being so angry. Who would have thought that Bai Kun would push the commoners onto the city gate tower? If that was the case, they would inevitably hit the commoners if they wanted to fire. If that was the case, just the words of the scholars and the mouths of the celestials would be enough to make it difficult for the commoners to defend themselves. What should we do? The two of them looked at each other at almost the same time. As the highest-ranking officers in this army, the two of them felt the pressure at this moment. It even made them feel a little breathless. Let's ask the sixth young master. Tianhu thought for a while and made a decision. Okay, but you have to report it secretly, Xiaofeng added after hearing that. Why did they have to send the message secretly? It was because they didn't want the sixth young master to be the scapegoat. As a subordinate, as a subject, they had to share the burden of their master. If they sent the message openly, where would they put Yang Qindong? Fight. If that was the case, the crime of indiscriminate killing of civilians would fall on Yang Qindong's head. The history books wouldn't record it well. Retreat without fighting? If that's the case, how are we going to solve the problem in Guangxi? However, if they were to fight without asking for permission, what if the sixth young master had a better idea or had other plans? Wouldn't that be tantamount to ruining the sixth young master's plans? They couldn't bear such a crime. Therefore they had to send a telegram, but they had to send a secret telegram. This way they could know Yang Qindong's thoughts and solve this problem. Even if the two of them had to take the blame in the end, as long as the sixth young master knew the whole story, even if he punished them, it wouldn't be too heavy. The 5-star army began to set up their formation outside the city. The secret message was also sent out and sent to the head of the intelligence department, Wang Shan. Then it was quickly placed in front of Yang Qindong, who was still in the palace of the 3 provinces. Yang Qindong was shocked when he saw the telegram. He remembered that during the War of Resistance against Japan, there was a time when the Japanese took the civilians to attack the army of D, which gave the People's Army a headache. He didn't expect that such a scene would happen to him. Come, bring me Bai Kuan's information. Since it was something that might happen, Yang Qindong was naturally prepared for it. However, he still needed to understand more about the situation before that. After all, his approach could solve the problem once, but it didn't mean that it could be solved every time. Once the other party was on guard, it would be much more difficult to solve such a problem in the future. Wang Shan quickly sent the information about Bai Kuan to Yang Qindong. Okay, put the information here first. Call back to Tianhu and Xiaofeng. Tell them to wait. Don't act rashly before there are new orders. When the telegram reached Nanning, Tianhu and General Xiaofeng breathed a sigh of relief. Since the 6th young master had given instructions, they only needed to follow it. As for the problem in front of them, they would definitely get a perfect solution. In the eyes of the generals, since this was an order from Yang Qindong, the problem would definitely be solved. This was also the result of many years of trust. Bai Kuan, who was on the top floor of Nanning Prefecture, didn't know about this. He only saw the 5-star army stop at the bottom of the city and didn't dare to attack. He was immediately overjoyed. He thought that he had found a good way to curb the development of the 5-star army. For this reason, he had even specially written a memorial and had it sent to the capital at the fastest speed possible. Before his memorial could reach the capital, a tragedy happened in the capital. In the courtyard that the Southern Ming dynasty had arranged for Bai Kuan's family, in just one night people and animals were all killed. From the elderly to the children, even the dogs, chickens and other animals they raised were all killed. No one survived. From the top to the bottom of the dozens of people, no one was able to breathe. The seriousness of the case and the cruelty of the methods, even if the Southern Ming dynasty wanted to hide it, they couldn't. In just one morning, the news had spread throughout the entire Yingtian prefecture, Nanjing prefecture. What was even worse was that the murderer had left words on the wall. The words were written in blood. The first bailiff to enter the courtyard could see it very clearly. It was very eye-catching. Clearly this was Yang Qindong's method of revenge. Yang Qindong had never been a peaceful person. Especially towards those who were his enemies, he would never be lenient. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gained so much territory and influence in such a short period of time. Bai Kuan wanted to use the common people to threaten him, so he could only use a thunderous method to get rid of his family. Although the process was somewhat cruel, in order to prevent this kind of thing from happening in the future, he could only be forced to do this. The facts also proved that this had indeed intimidated many people with bad intentions. They didn't care about their own life and death because that was their mission. But for their entire family to be killed, it was obviously something they didn't want to see. It was enough to make them feel afraid. Yang Qindong used facts to tell everyone that on the battlefield, it didn't matter how the two sides fought. That was the fate of a soldier and it was his duty. But if you wanted to play tricks behind his back, then you had to have enough courage to bear everything. If you didn't have such a mind and spirit, then it was best to play according to the rules of the game. Regarding these things, Bai Kuan was completely unaware because of the lack of communication. He was still proud of his method of forcing the common people to go upstairs and intimidating the 5-star army. On the evening of the third day, the 5-star army's camp outside the city welcomed Tai Hu and a group of Xianxia Special Forces members. Tai Hu and the others were prepared by Yang Qindong to help Tian Hu and Xiao Feng solve the problem. Captain Tai. Tian Hu and Xiao Feng both saluted and greeted. Tai Hu, who had the rank of Major General, also laughed and raised his arm to salute. The two of you have higher ranks than me, I should be the one saluting the two of you. In terms of military rank, both Tian Hu and Xiao Feng were lieutenant generals, and they both had 2 gold stars. But they knew that people like Tai Hu couldn't be judged by military rank. Everyone knew that although the Xianxia Special Forces had the least number of people, their combat power was very high. They specialized in completing difficult missions that a large army couldn't. Of course, the most important point was that the Xianxia Special Forces members weren't under the jurisdiction of the 5-star army's army. They were under their own rule and were only under the control of Yang Qindong. Even if the 6th young master wasn't around, they would only listen to the eldest prince, who was also Xia's successor, Yang Bo's orders. Just based on this, they couldn't be compared to him. Both sides were familiar with each other. After all, they had trained together in the early days and had many years of camaraderie. Now that they were gathered together, they couldn't help but warm up. After connecting, Tai Hu told Yang Qindong about some of the things that Yang Qindong had instructed him to do before he came here. Generals, the 6th young master wants you to assist us. There shouldn't be any problems, right? Since it was Yang Qindong's order, Tian Hu and Xiao Feng naturally didn't have any objections. After nodding their heads, they said in unison, "We will obey the 6th young master's order. Captain Tai, please tell us what to do." "Okay, then I'll be overconfident." Tai Hu laughed, then walked to the sand table and began to arrange the combat mission. The morning of the 4th day. The weather was beautiful and the wind was gentle and the sun was bright. The sun hung high in the sky and there weren't even many white clouds. Bai Kuan slept until dawn. When he woke up in the morning, he looked up at the sky and couldn't help but sigh. Good weather. Then, with the help of his bodyguards, he put on his armor and went up the city gate tower. Before they could reach the top of the city wall, someone had already reported that the 5-star army had started to move. The 5-star army's field cannons had also started to advance. What? Do they really dare? Hearing this, Bai Kuan's face tensed up. He was most afraid that the 5-star army would disregard all criticism and launch a fierce attack. In this way, although the other side would also be criticized by the public, the first to die would be him. This was something he absolutely didn't want to see. He hurriedly went up the city gate tower and saw the cannons continuously moving forward. Not only that, the 5-star army also split up. A large number of cavalry moved towards the north and south gates. What are they doing? Bai Kuan was puzzled at first. After thinking it through, he couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. What? Do they want to play a trick of surprise? Then you are destined to miscalculate. On the other city gate towers, I have also arranged for many civilians. Unless you dare to risk universal condemnation, you can dream of attacking the city. The 5-star army's actions didn't make Bai Kuan feel afraid. He had a feeling that the other side was just bluffing. They wouldn't dare to casually attack civilians. Since that was the case, what was there for him to worry about? Bai Kuan's heart calmed down. However, what he didn't know was that in the sky above him, there was an air force flying over. Chapter 1611. Strictly speaking, this was not a real air force. It was a mobile air force unit made up of powered umbrellas. They were different from the real air force. They didn't need to use hot air balloons to fly. They only needed one person with a single umbrella to fly and then control the landing to any designated location. This air force unit was made up of the Wolf Fang Special Forces members. The so-called strong army mostly referred to the land tigers. After the Navy, there was the name of the Sea Dragon. After that, there was the Air Force, and then there was the name of the Sky Eagle. These were the 3 armies of the future. For a time the three armies had their own things to do. Unless there was a difficult battle, they would join forces to fight and display more power. But there was an army that had the advantages of the three armies. They could fly, go into the sea, and even fight on land. They were the members of the Wolf Fang Special Forces. This time, using the powered umbrellas to fight in the air was Yang Qindong's method to break through the situation. When the order was given to Captain Tai Hu, he gladly accepted it. This kind of training was very mysterious in the eyes of other armies. But for the Wolf Fang Special Forces, it was a piece of cake. They didn't know how many times they had trained like this. They had already reached the realm of advancing and retreating freely. Today it was time for them to test the results. After all, the training was for battle. Now it was finally time to use it. Hundreds of powered umbrellas rose above Nanning Prefecture and then glided down towards the city. Every soldier had their own clear goal, and they were already familiar with it last night. Now what they needed to do was to quickly enter the city and kill their way out. They needed to seize the East City Gate and create an excellent opportunity for the main force of the Five-Star Army to enter the city. As for whether the 300 members of the Wolf Fang Special Forces could complete this mission, there was no need to worry. Every one of them was equipped with a Type 95 submachine gun and was fully loaded with bullets. This was enough to ensure that they would be able to form the greatest combat power and achieve the military objective. Bai Kun still didn't know about all this. His eyes were still on the Five-Star Army. He wanted to see what kind of tricks they were going to play so that he could react accordingly. On top of every city tower, inside every city gate, he had arranged for a large number of civilians to gather here. As long as the Five-Star Army dared to open fire, they would definitely blow up innocent civilians. This way they would have to take the blame. If they didn't want to take the blame, they couldn't use the cannons to bombard them, and they wouldn't be able to enter the city. As long as he couldn't enter the city, he had nothing to be afraid of. Previously, he had already transferred the entire Guangxi region's army into the Nan clan manor. There were over 30,000 soldiers in the city, which was more than enough to defend the 4 city walls and the city gates. As time passed, the Southern Ming Imperial Court would definitely send reinforcements when they saw that he was stuck here like a nail. At that time, the entire Nanning Prefecture would be saved. Bai Kun even thought that at that time he might be the true hero of the Southern Ming dynasty. In his heart he was still dreaming about the beautiful future. He didn't know that nearly 300 people of the Five-Star Army had already passed over his head. Moreover, the power umbrella made a loud noise. This was because the Five-Star Army cavalry was moving on a large scale, so the sound was covered by the sound of the horses' hooves. This wasn't because Bai Kun was careless, but because he didn't know what the Five-Star Army was capable of. In fact, it wasn't just him, even Tianhu and Xiaofeng were considered the core members of the Five-Star Army. However, they didn't know what the power umbrella was and why it was so powerful. It was because of this that Yang Qindong was so mysterious. Because they didn't know what more powerful methods their master had yet to use, it made their hearts filled with awe and respect for the 6th young master even more. Using the cover, the Wolf Fang Special Forces successfully flew to the sky above Nanning Prefecture. Then they slowed down and began to move towards the East Gate. In comparison, the East Gate was the furthest away from the Five-Star Army's main force, and the defense was also the most lax. At least until now, they hadn't seen any sign of the Five-Star Army outside the East Gate. Without any opponents, their vigilance naturally decreased a lot. This also created better conditions and opportunities for the Wolf Fang Special Forces to attack. One after another, the power umbrellas flew over and arrived at the street closest to the East Gate. This was also thanks to Bai Kun's cooperation. If he didn't bring all the people in the city to the city tower and the gate, the whereabouts of Tianhu and the others would definitely attract some people's attention. But now there was no one on the street, so they could hide their whereabouts quietly. Then they closed the umbrellas and gathered. They gathered the power umbrellas together and placed them in an empty courtyard. Then they started to check the equipment and personnel. There were a total of 288 people in this trip. Except for one person who stepped on a roof when he landed and suffered a slight ankle injury, the rest of the people stood in front of them unharmed. Tianhu faced 287 people. His face was a little red and he was very excited. He knew that after this battle the name of the Wolf Fang Special Forces would be completely known. Leave 18 people behind to guard the equipment. The remaining 270 people will be divided into 9 teams. Each team has 30 people. Search in a fan shape and move towards the east gate. Remember, unless you encounter the enemy's main force, it's better not to fire if you don't have to. Do you understand? Tianhu asked loudly. In the entire team except for the 18 people who were about to be left behind, the rest of the 270 people answered in unison. If it weren't for the fact that they were in the enemy's heart and couldn't shout loudly, their shouts would have caused the earth to shake. In the following time they formed the teams. Except for the injured persons, 17 people were left behind unwillingly to guard the equipment. The other 9 teams were quickly organized and then followed their respective team leaders to search in the direction of the target. When the Wolf Fong Special Forces was established, one of the earliest tasks was to carry out the beheading operation. Therefore their vigilance was extremely high. For example, how to camouflage and move forward in the enemy's rear was their specialty. 9 teams with a total of 270 people moved together. This could be said to be the biggest operation of the Wolf Fong Special Forces in the enemy's rear. Everyone knew the importance of this task, so they were very careful when they moved forward. No one wanted to drag the whole team down because of their own reasons. The result of their concerted efforts was that they were not discovered by anyone until they moved to the east gate. Team 3 and Team 4 will take the initiative to attack. The other teams will protect them. If things go wrong, you can choose to shoot. When they moved to a place 1 mile away from the east gate, Tianhu made a gesture to stop the team and start to arrange the situation. 5 minutes later, teams 3 and 4 with a total of 60 people became the first echelon. They walked out of the darkness and moved toward the east gate, which was slightly empty. These 60 soldiers were all wearing the military uniform of the South Ming Army. This was one of the items they had obtained when they encountered the patrol team of the South Ming Army. Now was the time to borrow this flag. Outside the east gate, the soldiers of the South Ming Army stood in a mess. Some of them had even leaned against the bricks below the city gate tower, closing their eyes to rest or taking a short nap. The soldiers would only open their eyes when the civilians under the city gate moved. Then they would reveal a ferocious look, warning and threatening the innocent civilians not to move. Otherwise, the consequences would be very serious. When Taihu and the others saw this through the binoculars, they gritted their teeth in hatred. Was this how the strong bullied the weak and the strong bullied the weak? Did they only know how to threaten the defenseless civilians? What kind of ability was this? Fortunately, teams 3 and 4 attacked at this moment. It was time to save the civilians. They were all wearing the military uniform of the South Ming Army and looked like they had just returned from a patrol. Even if some of the South Ming Army saw them, they did not think much of it and continued to do what they were supposed to do. After all, they were on the same side and there was nothing to be suspicious about. 400 meters, 300 meters, 150 meters. When they were finally 50 to 60 steps away, those with good eyesight could clearly see the faces of the other party. A chilly arch of the South Ming Army had a puzzled expression on his face. He realized that he did not recognize a single one of the South Ming Army. He did not even recognize a single one of them. This unexpected situation attracted the attention of the chilly arch. He could not help but shout, "Which general are you under? Why do you look so unfamiliar?" This shout also attracted the attention of the other South Ming Army soldiers. Everyone looked at these people with puzzled expressions. The captain of the third team was Zhou Ho. He had already expected this to happen and did not panic. Instead he laughed and said, "I am General Bai Kuan's personal guard. This time I am here to inspect you. I say your vigilance is not bad. The city gate is so tightly sealed. You can't be thinking that the 5-star army is so resourceful that they can fly into the city, right?" This explanation immediately attracted a wave of laughter. It was clear that everyone had the same thought. They did not think that the 5-star army could enter the city with such a tight seal. In addition, Zhou Ho said that he was Lord Bai Kuan's personal guard. Just this identity alone was enough to make everyone look up to him. So it is Lord Personal Guard. Forgive my poor eyesight. Quickly come and rest. The chilly arch revealed a fawning smile. Chapter 16:12. Since someone invited him, Zhou Ho naturally wouldn't be polite. He called the members of Squad 3 and 4 and strode towards the East City Gate. While walking, they also intentionally tidied up the long backpack behind them. It contained the 95 style. Completely caught off guard, Zhou Ho brought his men to the side of the chilly arch. The other members also began to move closer to the other soldiers of the Southern Ming army. A silent killing intent was spreading. The chilly arch seemed to be a chatterbox, but he also seemed to have a friendly personality. When he saw Skinny Monkey standing in front of him, he walked up with a smile. Then he noticed the long cloth bag and asked curiously, "Lord Bodyguard, may I know what this is?" "Why, do you want to know?" Zhou Ho didn't have any intention to refuse. He smiled and took the long cloth from his back and placed it in front of the chilly arch. "Oh, can I see it?" "In that case, I'd like to broaden my horizons." The chilly arch chuckled with an intrigued look on his face. It seemed that everyone was very curious about the unknown. At this moment, not only the chilly arch, but the other Southern Ming soldiers also came to the side of the Xianxia Special Forces members with curious looks. Even the Southern Ming soldiers who were responsible for guarding the civilians also gathered. "Oh, I see. Then I'll show it to you. This is the secret weapon prepared by Lord Baikuan." Skinny Monkey-like laughed, then gave a look to the other Special Forces members. Then the long cloth strip was slowly opened, and the black gun body appeared in front of the Southern Ming soldiers. Most of these Southern Ming soldiers were people who rebelled with the three provinces King Zhu Huitu. But after Baikuan surrendered to the Southern Ming army, they also changed and became part of the Southern Ming army. For people like them, their military quality was very ordinary, not to mention their knowledge. For people like them, firearms were something they had only heard of and had never seen with their own eyes. Not to mention the extremely advanced 95 style. When this thing was taken out, they only knew that it was an iron lump. As for what it was used for, they had no idea at all. Zhou Ho and the other members took out the 95 style in front of the enemy, then held it in their hands and pulled the safety. "How is it? Have you never seen him before? Let me tell you, this is the newest firearm. Its name is the 95 style. How about this? There's no point in just talking about it. I'll show you all their might so that everyone will have more confidence when it comes to defending the city." Yes. Let us take a look and we will be more confident." The Southern Ming soldiers nodded in agreement. They didn't know that at this time, they had already taken a step into the gates of hell. Skinny Monkey and the others didn't expect things to go so smoothly. Each of the team members quickly communicated with each other with their eyes. Skinny Monkey even straightforwardly made a hand gesture. This was not only for the 59 team members beside him to see, but also for Captain Tai Tiger, who was a mile away. He was sending the signal to attack. Fire. Everything was ready. The chilly arch was still standing together with the soldiers waiting to watch the show. Suddenly they realized that the black muzzles were pointed at them. Before they could react and understand what was going on, gunshots rang out. Bullets flew out from the muzzles as if they had eyes and hit their bodies. In exchange, the Southern Ming soldiers fell to the ground one after another. Their bodies were strangely identical with bullet holes that were bleeding. At such a close distance, and when the enemy wasn't prepared, the 1,000 Southern Ming soldiers didn't even have time to react before they fell to the ground one by one. The originally bustling East City Tower instantly became much more spacious. Charge! Tai Tiger was overjoyed when he saw all of this. Skinny Monkey and the others had successfully completed their mission and occupied the East City Gate. Now it was time for him to launch his attack. He stood up and gave the order to the other members of the Special Forces to charge. At the same time, he raised his hand and shot a red signal flare into the sky, signaling to the 5-star army cavalry outside the city to attack. The first to be frightened by the sudden change on the city tower were the commoners who were driven into the city. Just a moment ago they saw the Southern Ming soldiers surrounding Skinny Monkey and the others. But in just a short while, all of them fell to the ground and became corpses? What kind of powerful weapons were these people holding? Also, if these people wanted to attack them with guns, what should they do? Wait for death? Even at this time, the commoners were still cowering and huddling together. No one thought of resisting with their lives. It had to be said that this was also a kind of tragedy. Someone once said that when the Japanese invaded China, 2 Japanese soldiers were enough to watch over 2,000 people and make them not dare to act rashly. That was a scene that people didn't dare to imagine. But this was the most realistic portrayal of what happened to the commoners. This was the behavior of the foolish commoners. The way they were educated made them listen to everything that happened. Without anyone leading them, even if they knew that they would die, they would still accept it. They didn't even have the thought of resisting. It really made people angry and sad. However, this kind of thing wouldn't happen in the future. After becoming a Xianxia citizen, they would be educated and learn how to read and learn. At that time, they would know that people's lives were equal. If others wanted to kill them, they would kill them back. This was a legitimate defense and also a result of human nature. In this way, if someone wanted to harm the Han people in the future, they would have to wait for the countless Han people to stand up and resist them. At that time, even if you were a devil, the commoners would work together to tear you to pieces and defeat you. Back in the real world, Tai Hu and the others started to charge. After the southern Ming soldiers on the city tower noticed that something was wrong, they started to send troops to attack the city gate. Instantly, gunshots rang out and the soldiers of the South Ming dynasty fell into a pool of blood. When Tai Hu and the others started to charge, Skinny Monkey also came in front of the commoners and said loudly to them, "We are the 5-star army. We are here to save you. In order to survive, please help us open the city gate and welcome the 5-star army into the city. Don't worry, at that time no one will be able to threaten your lives. As long as your actions are reasonable and legal, you will be the proud Han people in the future. No one will dare to bully you anymore. I can guarantee that." Hearing Skinny Monkey say that he was sent by the 5-star army to save them, there was no need for any guarantees. The commoners all became excited. In the past, there were some rumors about the 5-star army, saying that they were very good to the Han people. If there were people who didn't believe it when they were defending the city, the 5-star army didn't use cannons to blast open the city gate and injure them. Therefore, at this moment, there was no need for Skinny Monkey to guarantee anything. All of the commoners chose to believe him. What are you waiting for? Open the city gate and let the 5-star army in. Among the commoners, someone finally reacted and shouted. The commoners were like this. Once someone took the lead, they could display unimaginable strength. With everyone working together, the thick city gate was pushed open. At this moment, smoke and dust could be seen rising from the east gate. That was the scene of the 5-star army's cavalry from the north and south of the city. Very good, you have used your actions to save your own lives. You have done very well. However, there are still many commoners like you who are being used at the other 3 city gates. If you are willing, you can come with us to save more commoners. As the saying goes, saving a life is better than building a 7-storied pagoda. Your chance to accumulate good karma has come. Of course, if you don't want to go, no one will force you. As long as you stay here, your safety will be guaranteed. Skinny Monkey was still using his words to encourage the commoners. This was because this step was the first step for them to change. Under Skinny Monkey's persuasion and with the thought that saving people could accumulate good karma, the main reason was that many of the commoners' relatives were still at the other city gates and they indeed needed their help. Therefore, this suggestion quickly gained the support of most of the commoners. At this moment, more and more commoners responded, and Skinny Monkey's team continued to expand. Good, then everyone get ready. When the main cavalry of the 5-star army enters the city, we will go to the other city gates. At that time, how many commoners we can save will depend on you. Skinny Monkey was very satisfied with the commoners' performance and immediately grinned. In front of the city gate, Tai Hu led 7 small teams to snipe the South Ming army coming down from the top of the city gate. Those who were able to join the Wolf Fong Special Forces and pass the assessment were all very skilled. As for the marksmanship, it was the focus of their training. Not all of them were sharpshooters, but they were not far from it. When they unleashed their godly spear techniques, none of the southern Ming soldiers who rushed down the city walls were able to escape. They were all shot to death. Thousands of people rushed down continuously, but none of them could reach the city gate. The general guarding the east city was finally afraid. He no longer sent people to attack the city gate. Instead, he lit up a thick smoke and began to warn them. At this moment, countless cavalry soldiers of the First Army entered the city through the east city gate. At this point, the scales of victory began to tilt. Bai Kun was still watching the performance of the 5-star army on the west city gate tower. When he saw the cavalry of the 5-star army constantly moving and the ground rumbling, he had already changed from the initial fear to the current calm. Chapter 16:13. In his opinion, this was simply the 5-star army's bluff. If they really had such strength, they would have charged into the city a long time ago instead of lingering here from morning to noon. It was as if they had nothing to do. Lord, thick smoke, thick smoke. A guard casually looked back out of boredom and saw the thick smoke rising from the east gate. Then he exclaimed out loud. What thick smoke? Seeing how unsettled his guard was, Bai Kun showed a disdainful expression. He was already thinking of kicking this person out of the guard team. After all, if he wanted to follow his own people, he needed to be calm because he was a hero of the Southern Ming dynasty. As he spoke, Bai Kun also turned around and saw the thick smoke rising from the east gate. At this moment he completely forgot what it meant to be calm. He just stood there with his mouth wide open. He didn't know what to do. Wasn't there no 5-star army outside the east gate? Why is there smoke rising all of a sudden? What is going on? Could it be that someone had mistakenly lit the smoke signal? As soon as this idea came out, it was directly rejected by Bai Kun. Even if there was a mistake, it should have been extinguished immediately instead of letting the smoke get bigger and bigger. In this case there could only be one result. The east gate was in danger and it might have been breached by the 5-star army. What's going on? Where did the main force of the 5-star army come from outside the east gate? How did they attack the city? Why didn't we hear the sound of cannons? As soon as he opened his mouth he asked a series of questions. But regarding all this no one knew what was going on, so naturally no one could answer Bai Kun's question. Report. Fortunately, it didn't take long before a scout from the city rushed to Bai Kun's feet. What the hell happened? Tell me. Bai Kun grabbed the scout's collar and asked with red eyes. Reporting to the general. That scout was also shocked by Bai Kun's words. However, he still replied instinctively. The 5-star army suddenly appeared in the city and attacked from the inside. Now that the main force of the 5-star army has entered the city, all the city gates have become dangerous. General, please send reinforcements. When the scout's reply entered Bai Kun's ears, he shook his head in disbelief. Impossible. How could there be 5-star army reinforcements in the city? Didn't we check it before? Where did they come from? Bai Kun found it hard to believe the truth in front of him. If someone were to tell him right now that the 5-star army's reinforcements had flown over while his attention was focused on the cavalry below the city walls, he would definitely not believe it. But now, regardless of whether he believed it or not, things had already happened. What he needed to do now was to send reinforcements. But the problem was, if he were to face the 5-star army head-on, would his 30,000 South Ming soldiers really be a match? If he was an opponent, why would he threaten the commoners to become human shields? Although he knew that the possibility of them being a match wasn't high. But at this moment he had no other choice. Bai Kun waved his hand and said with the attitude of a general who wouldn't return, "Leave a portion of you to guard the west side of the city. The rest of you follow me down the city walls. We will work together to chase the 5-star army out of the city." Chasing them out was a lie. The real thing was to find a chance to escape. Because when Bai Kun said this, he didn't have the confidence to do it. The soldiers below didn't know the truth. They only saw that even the general was going to get on the horse and they were all encouraged. Thinking that the city was still their territory, they all shouted and followed Bai Kun down the city walls. The 5-star army's cavalry entered the city. Leading them was a division commander, Taimur. He had quite a bit of experience and most importantly his horse riding skills weren't bad. After entering the city he led the cavalry and started to rampage. Whenever they met the South Ming reinforcements, the cavalry would crush the South Ming infantrymen in an instant. After the cavalry charged past, the ground was covered with corpses. The soldiers he brought were all veterans and elites. Furthermore, they were cavalry and had a natural ability to crush infantrymen. There really wasn't anyone who was a match for him. Wherever the cavalry went, the South Ming soldiers would either run away or kneel on the ground in surrender. The world's #1 cavalry was simply too strong. They were so strong that no one was a match for them after entering the city. Under Taimur's leadership, they first attacked the North City Gate and defeated the South Ming soldiers there. They opened the city gate from the inside and allowed the soldiers of the 2nd Division to enter the city. Following this, the 2nd Division headed straight for the South City Gate while Taimur led his troops to the West City Gate. As the saying goes, enemies are bound to meet. Before they charged far, they saw a group of South Ming soldiers coming from the West City Gate. The general leading them was General Bai Kun, who had just been appointed as Guangxi's left envoy. From afar, Bai Kun also saw Taimur. However, he didn't recognize him. Seeing that he was wearing a general's armor, he only thought that he was an ordinary general. Bai Kun, who wanted to take advantage of the chaos to kill his way out, naturally wouldn't avoid anyone. He needed to kill his way out. TSK, come and die. Facing the 5-star army that didn't have any firearms, Bai Kun was still confident. After all, he was personally appointed as the Guangxi Great General by Zhu Huitu. You are Bai Kun. On the other hand, Taimur recognized the general immediately. This was also because before the battle someone had drawn a portrait of Bai Kun. It was precisely because he had seen it that he recognized Bai Kun. He was a little surprised. He was surprised that Bai Kun recognized him. However, at this moment he definitely wouldn't back down because of this reason. On the contrary, he waved his spear and charged forward. Who cared how this person recognized him? He would kill him first. Ah, good timing. Taimur wasn't disappointed that Bai Kun didn't respond. He only needed to know that Bai Kun's identity was very important. Holding his scimitar, Taimur began to speed up. It was precisely because he knew Bai Kun's identity that Taimur didn't dare to be careless. Before he attacked, he had already made sufficient preparations. His other scimitar was ready to be unsheathed at any time. On the other hand, Bai Kun's fighting strength was weaker than Taimur's to begin with. In addition, he had underestimated his opponent. He didn't think that his luck would be so bad that he would randomly encounter a famous general in the 5-star army. Therefore, when he attacked, he held back 30% of his strength so that he could charge forward later. After all, he didn't know how difficult the road ahead would be. If he used up all his strength right away, what would he do in the future? Just like that, one held back 30% of his strength while the other used all his strength. Originally, the strength of both sides wasn't equal. The strong were stronger and the weak were weaker. After just one exchange of blows, Bai Kun knew that he had made a big mistake. The spear and scimitar collided. In that instant, a huge force was transmitted through his arm. It also caused Bai Kun's entire body to tremble. His right hand that was holding the weapon almost lost its strength and threw it away. When an expert showed his hand, it was obvious whether he was skilled or not. After knowing Taimur's strength, Bai Kun decided to use all his strength to deal with him. At the same time, he secretly cursed his bad luck. How could he meet such a fierce general so casually? However, it was obviously a little too late for Bai Kun to get serious. Taimur, who had gained the upper hand in one move, laughed heartily and waved his left hand. The scimitar quickly drew a gust of wind and slashed across Bai Kun's armor. With one slash, the armor was split into two. At the same time, blood and flesh were drawn out. It was just one slash. If it wasn't for the armor protecting his body, Bai Kun's body would have been split into two. Ayaya. Bai Kun involuntarily cried out when he felt the intense pain in his chest. He then turned around and tried to leave. Beside him, a few of his personal guards rushed over on their horses in an attempt to save their master. The bodyguards weren't slow. However, compared to the soldiers of the world's #1 cavalry army, they were much slower. These soldiers seemed to have expected something would happen. Without waiting for the bodyguards to rush over, they rushed out and blocked the path of the bodyguards. Taking this opportunity, Taimur chased after Bai Kun. Just as Bai Kun turned his horse around, a slash of his scimitar came towards him. Bai Kun didn't expect that he would be hit again. His arm was hit once more and he fell from his horse as a result. Save the general. When the bodyguards who didn't have horses saw this scene, they quickly rushed forward and blocked Taimur with their lives. Then, under the protection of the bodyguards, Bai Kun, who was covered in blood, led the infantrymen behind him and kept retreating. Take the small path. Although Bai Kun had been slashed twice, he was still conscious. After that exchange, he saw the power of the 5-star army's cavalry. He knew that it wasn't realistic to escape by the main road. The only way was to rely on everyone's familiarity with the terrain of Nanning Prefecture and take the small paths to shake off their pursuers. The South Ming army was retreating while blocking the enemy. Along the way they left behind more and more corpses. Hence, Bai Kun was getting further and further away from Taimur. He was now 70 steps away. Let's stay. Seeing the fat meat in his hands trying to slip away, how could Taimur agree? If he really let the target escape, who knew how the other division commanders would laugh at him when he returned. He took out the Big Dipper crossbow from his back and pulled the bowstring. The Big Dipper crossbow was the exclusive weapon of the world's #1 army. Because the materials used to make it were expensive, it wasn't easy to make. Hence, the only army that could use it was the world's #1 army. When the Big Dipper crossbow was taken out, the so-called South Ming army became a target that couldn't withstand a single blow. Faced with the crossbow that could fire 7 arrows at a time, and the speed at which the arrows were loaded and loaded was extremely fast, a large number of South Ming soldiers fell in just 2 waves of attacks. Chapter 16:14. Some of them had already become corpses, while others had knelt down and surrendered out of fear. This caused Taimur to have no obstacles in his way. With a loud laugh, Commander Taimur leapt out on his horse and headed straight for the injured Baikuan. The 5-star army's cavalry entered the city, which meant that Nanning Prefecture had fallen. When the 4 city gates opened from the inside, countless commoners erupted with their strength, knocking down the 20,000 southern Ming soldiers. The strength of the commoners could not be underestimated. It was fine if they didn't erupt, but once they did, the shocking strength they released would leave people speechless. Thus, Nanning Prefecture fell. The pitiful Baikuan was first captured alive by Taimur due to his injuries. After a simple bandage, he was tied to a pillar in front of the city square. Countless commoners swarmed over. The timid ones were allowed to throw rotten eggs or green vegetables at Baikuan's body. The more daring ones directly spat at him. There were even some who urinated on him on the streets. As for the more daring ones, they used sharp daggers to slice off Baikuan's flesh under the supervision of the 5-star army soldiers. This was a punishment worse than death by 1,000 cuts. All of this was because Baikuan wanted to force the commoners into a state of certain death. Now retribution had arrived. If he had known that this would happen, he would not have chosen to use the commoners as a human shield even if he was beaten to death. Afterwards, when Baikuan's matter was intentionally spread to the various prefectures of southern Ming, all of the generals fell silent. They originally thought that the 5-star army's slogan of loving the commoners was a weakness that could be used against him. If they did it well, they might be able to turn defeat into victory. But now Baikuan had done this. Not only had he died without a burial place, but even his family had not received any benefits. All of them had died. With this living example in front of them, they could not help but learn from it. They did not want to become the second Baikuan. As for how the 5-star army appeared in the city, this matter became a mystery and many people had a question mark in their hearts. Nanning House was taken down. As the capital of Guangxi, this had a huge meaning and alerted the South Ming troops in the other provinces. Right now, no one doubted whether the 5-star army would be able to conquer Guangxi. What they were thinking about was whether the 5-star army would continue to expand after conquering Guangxi. This was something that everyone was concerned about. Time passed day by day. After Baikuan was killed and Nanning Prefecture was broken through, the other prefectures in Guangxi all surrendered, to the extent that the world's 1st Cavalry Army, Cold Front's 2nd Division, and Russia's 1st Division had no choice but to fight on different fronts. However, even if they split up their forces, their progress was still very fast. Without encountering any tough battles, the 5-star army's vanguard would often open their doors and surrender. Just like this, in less than a month, the entire Guangxi region was under the influence of the 5-star army. Yang Qindong had also achieved his goal when he first came to Yunnan House, which was to completely control Yunnan, Guizhou and Guangxi. In the 6th month of 1467 AD, when everyone's attention was on whether the 5-star army would continue to expand, Commander Xiaofeng's 2nd Division suddenly went south from Guangxi's Lianzhou Prefecture. With the firearms in their hands, in a short 10 days, they took down Guangxi's Gaozhou Prefecture and Laizhou Prefecture. This action shocked Guangdong's Chief Minister Zhou Xian, who had been paying attention to the 5-star army. Previously, his staff had made many hypotheses, but they did not think that the 5-star army would make a move on Guangdong. This sudden action made Zhou Xian feel somewhat at a loss. Afterwards, he anxiously called for a meeting of Guangdong's rank 4 civil and military officials to discuss a solution. In the meeting, everyone was arguing incessantly. Some people felt that the 5-star army was not to be trifled with. If they rashly attacked, Not only would they have no chance of winning, it would also easily drag the entire Guangdong region into the flames of war. In the end, they would follow in Guangxi's footsteps. If that happened, everyone would be sinners. There were also people who felt that it was fine to attack, but they had to obtain the emperor's orders. Otherwise, they would be acting without a valid reason. If the five-star army only wanted to take over these two prefectures and did not intend to start a war on Guangdong, then if they took the initiative to attack, wouldn't they be forcing the five-star army to make a decision? After all, there was news from the front lines that the five-star army wanted to take over Lizhou prefecture because it was close to the sea. It was convenient for the five-star army to transport supplies to the three provinces. This was a bit forced. Taking over other people's land to transport supplies was a bit too much. However, in the end, who asked the five-star army to be so strong? This method was not reasonable, but it was somewhat reasonable. There were also people who wanted to directly attack back. The people who made this suggestion were mostly generals with lower statuses. They felt that the five-star army taking over Gaozhou and Lizhou was already a provocation to the entire southern Ming Empire. If they did not attack back, where would their face be? Facing all kinds of thoughts, there was still no final decision even when the sky turned dark. Zhou Xian could only announce the end of the meeting and return to his own residence's backyard. It must be said that this was a place that he often appeared in recently. The reason why he often came here was because there was an extremely important person living in the courtyard. Usually when Yang Ding wanted to enter, he had to report his arrival. But this time he didn't care so much. He directly broke in with a few servants and saw Minister Xia Chongshu, who was writing memorials in the room. Xia Chong, Minister of Rights of the Southern Ming Empire. A month ago he was ordered by Emperor Zhou Xian to Guangxi to prepare to negotiate with Bugnam of Gozhou. But no one knew that Xianxia was very afraid of death in his bones. There were no more records of this person in history. Only some unofficial records recorded that he was once a grand scholar, but his ranking was not very high. The reason why he was able to become the Minister of Rights was because there was no one in the Southern Ming Empire. In addition, he was willing to give money to those eunuchs. Because he was afraid of death, Xiachong walked slowly the entire way. As a result, he only arrived at the capital of Guangdong province 10 days ago. When he arrived, there was already news that the five-star army had taken over the entirety of Guangxi. Xiachong was unable to accept this result. Didn't he receive a report from the imperial court a while ago that Bai Kuan had built a human wall in Nanning and blocked the advance of the five-star army? However, how long had it been? How could the entire territory be taken over by the five-star army? Since Guangxi was gone, Xiachong's mission was also gone. He quietly entered Sir Yang Fu's residence without alerting anyone. From his point of view, it was very likely that the imperial court would send a new decree. At that time he could return to the capital and leave this dangerous place. However, who would have thought that the five-star army would take an inch and want a mile? Not only did they take over Guangxi, they even sent troops to occupy Gaozhou and Lizhou. This was not something that the Southern Ming Empire could tolerate. Thus, he wrote another letter to the imperial court and waited for the new decree. Others did not know that Xiachong had come to Guangdong, but as the host Zhou Xian was very clear. Xiachong lived in the backyard of his residence. If he wanted to see him, he could do so after notifying him. Tonight, he suddenly barged into the courtyard because he wanted to ask what the emperor and the imperial court were thinking. Facing the aggressive five-star army, whether they wanted to fight or make peace, they had to give an explanation. "You're here. Have a seat." Xiachong did not care about Zhou Xian barging in at night. This was someone else's residence. If they wanted to come in, they could come in. Why would they need his permission? Not to mention he also had some things to say to Zhou Xian. "Lord Minister, the situation outside is very chaotic. It is very difficult for me." After sitting down, Zhou Xian began to complain. I know. Lord Yang, don't worry. I have already sent an urgent letter to the imperial court. I believe that there will be a reply soon. Don't worry. Xiachong was already panicking. However, in order to stabilize the morale of the soldiers and the people, he pretended to be comforting. Hearing that the letter had been sent, Zhou Xian's expression became much better. Presumably, the imperial court would not blame him for losing Gaozhou and Lizhou after knowing that the five-star army had sent out such a powerful force. If that was the case, it would be much easier to deal with this matter. At this moment he was also grateful that Minister Xiacheng was here. At least his position was not the highest. Something really happened, he would not have to take the blame. Although his mood became better, it was impossible to say that he was completely at ease. After all, he was the chief minister of Guangdong, the highest-ranking official here. If something happened in Guangdong, Xiacheng would be punished. He would not be any better. Since there were no outsiders here, Zhou Xian could ask some probing questions. Minister Xia, you see that the 5-star army doesn't care about anything. Shouldn't we also do some defensive work? For example, the teaming guard is not far from Gaozhou. Can we order them to prepare for battle in advance? Yes, Xiacheng said after thinking for a moment. Before receiving a new decree from the imperial court, no one knew what the emperor's decision would be. If the emperor decided to fight and he did not make any preparations, wouldn't he be delaying the important matter? He could not bear this responsibility. However, preparations were still preparations. After thinking for a while, Xiacheng said, Lord Yang, you can order the Guanghai Guard to make appropriate preparations. However, you must remember that if the 5-star army does not intend to continue east, do not take the initiative to provoke them. Violators will be punished according to military law. Chapter 16:15. Understood. This was also what Zhou Xian wanted to say. He did not want the 5-star army to attack because of his wrong decision. If that happened, there was an 80% chance that the Guangzhou prefecture would follow in the footsteps of the Nanning prefecture. The problem was, after the 5-star army conquered Guangxi, would they continue to attack the east and conquer Guangdong? The answer was in Yang Qindong's heart: they would not. There were many reasons why they would not do so. For example, they did not have enough excuses, they did not have a good reason to attack. The current southern Ming was quite strong, and if they continued to fight, both sides would suffer losses, etc. Ultimately, Yang Qindong or Xianxia and the 5-star army were not fully prepared. 6 years ago, because Yuandong province was attacked, Yang Qindong personally led the army and fought until now. The results of these 6 years were so great that it completely exceeded Yang Qindong's expectations. Before this, he wasn't mentally prepared for this. Even if they conquered 3 provinces this time, it was because of Zhu Huihua's provocation. Otherwise, Yang Qindong would have returned to Xichen City to rest. The situation was already beyond his expectations. The management staff could not keep up, and the army also needed to rest after a long battle. If he wanted to attack southern Ming, he did not know how much military resources and supplies he would need. Before all of these were prepared, Yang Qindong wanted to stop here. Of course, if southern Ming took the initiative to provoke him, then he would not be polite. If he didn't have enough management personnel, he could just use the old people from the southern Ming Empire. Then when there were new people, he could slowly replace them. Although doing this would cause instability in the rear, Yang Qindong wouldn't admit defeat when facing the southern Ming Empire's army. As for conquering Gaozhou and Laizhou, Yang Qindong really wanted to open up a sea supply route. In this way, all kinds of military supplies could enter the 3 provinces faster, and it would play a great role in stabilizing the situation. With such benefits, he had no choice but to do it. As for whether this would cause the southern Ming Empire to be disgusted or even take the initiative to send troops, Yang Qindong didn't want to think too much about it. What's the matter? You guys didn't care when Zhu Huiqiang sent troops to Langsun. You guys even supported Zhu Huiqiang with cannons. You even let Wang Mubin of Shiping deal with me. Taking down these 2 houses would be considered as interest. That was what Yang Qindong thought. After allowing Xiao Feng to take down Laizhou Prefecture, he ordered Leng Feng and the 2nd Division to build a port to receive the resources from Xichen City. He himself was waiting for the southern Ming Imperial Court to send someone to negotiate with him. Although there was a southern Ming envoy named Zhou Xian in the Nanning Prefecture, Yang Qindong wasn't going to talk to him. This person's rank was too low. He had already received news that Minister Xiacheng had personally come. Since that was the case, it was better to have a chat with this person. Zhou Xian, who had been neglected, was much more haggard than a month ago. He didn't know what was going on outside. He couldn't sleep well and didn't eat well. He had lost more than 5 kilograms. He had also requested to meet with His Highness Bugnam of Gojoseon more than once. At this moment he no longer had the arrogance from before. Even when he spoke to a courier, he was very polite. However, even though he was polite, the courier didn't take him seriously. Perhaps it could be said that the order he received was to watch Zhou Xian and the others. Everything else had nothing to do with him. He had requested for a meeting for several days. In order to achieve his goal, he had even taken out all of his valuables. It was all to curry favor with the courier. However, there was still no progress. At first he thought that the other party thought it was too little, so he kept increasing the price. However, in the end he realized that the other party really didn't want to accept it. On this point, Zhou Xian was filled with emotions. Since ancient times, there had been a saying that there were 7 rank officials in front of the prime minister's door. It was said that the status of a servant was similar to that of the master. When the master was powerful, the small people under him could also benefit and even rise to the heavens. Just like in the current Southern Ming dynasty, many servants of the big families were all arrogant. Sometimes they could even complete some tasks that only the officials could do. When they returned, they would receive some benefits. This was something that everyone tacitly agreed upon. After all, many things that the master wanted to do required the servants to complete. Why didn't this work in the 5-star army? Just from this small matter, one could see the power of the 5-star army. He couldn't even bribe a small courier. Zhou Xian didn't know what else he could do. Just like that, the days passed with sighs and sighs. Until one day Ba Daojiang suddenly appeared in the courier. When Zhou Xian saw the other party, tears actually flowed out of his eyes. It was as if he had seen his family after many years. At this moment Zhou Xian was indeed very emotional. He had finally met someone who kept his word. Assistant Minister Zhou, what happened to you? Could it be that someone mistreated you? Ba Daojiang was also shocked by the tears flowing out of Zhou Xian's eyes. He instinctively thought that someone had done something unfavorable to the Southern Ming dynasty. No. Seeing that Ba Daojiang had misunderstood, Zhou Xian shook his head and said, "We are very good here. There is enough food and drink and there is a lot of variety. It is really good." This wasn't to say that Zhou Xian was flattering, but it was the truth. When it came to food, Xianxia would never be thrifty or diligent when it came to it. Using a sentence that Yang Qindong once said, if one wanted to change every day, they wouldn't even be satisfied with food. If they couldn't change, then what change was there to change? Ba Daojiang nodded his head in satisfaction after hearing this. He also didn't believe that someone would dare to do such a thing. The 5-star army rewarded the soldiers with great merits very generously, but at the same time the punishment for the soldiers who made mistakes was also very severe. It was just like how the soldiers didn't dare to accept Zhou Xian's money. Because once they accepted it, it wasn't a matter of whether they could keep their money, but whether they could keep their lives. At that time their family would also be humiliated because of it. Everything was just for a bit of money, but they had to pay such a heavy price. It was no wonder that although the soldiers were tempted, none of them dared to accept the money. Ba Daojiang knew that there wasn't a problem with the treatment, but he was even more curious. Why was Zhou Xian crying when they met again after not seeing each other for more than a month? Speaking of which, they didn't have much of a relationship before, and this was only the second time they met. Moreover, the experience of meeting for the first time wasn't something that could make one happy, right? How could Ba Daojiang understand Zhou Xian's emotions? After all, if he hadn't been imprisoned for more than a month, he wouldn't be able to understand that feeling. It was just that the smart Zhou Xian would not voice out his feelings during this period of time. If he had the slightest bit of resentment, he was afraid that he would provoke the other party and leave in a huff. If that happened, he would not be able to call out to the heavens and the earth. He did not know how long he would have to endure. Not only did he not dare to complain, he also pretended to be fawning and asked, "Sir, is Bugnam of Gojosian here to see this official?" "Oh, that's not it." Ba Daojiang became more serious when they talked about serious matters. Little did he know that the moment he said this, Zhou Xian's mood instantly fell to the bottom. If he wasn't here to see him, was he just here to greet him? Or was he here to see if he and the others were dead? Or was he here to end his life? When he thought of the latter, Zhou Xian's face turned green, then quickly turned pale. It was obvious that he was really afraid. Ba Daojiang saw Zhou Xian's expression and already guessed what he was thinking. He couldn't help but chuckle and say, "Assistant Minister Zhou, don't think too much. This time I'm here on Bugnam of Gojosian's orders to let you and the others go. We've already received news that your Minister of Rights, Xia Chong, has arrived at the Guangzhou government. Since he's here, it's better to let him handle the negotiations. You can go back now and inform Minister Xia to come to the Nanning government. At that time, Bugnam of Gojosian will also arrive at the Nanning government. If there's anything, it's better to discuss it in detail there. After saying this, Ba Daojiang seemed to have thought of something and added, by the way, Bugnam of Gojosian is busy with military affairs and has many things to deal with. Therefore, I hope that Minister Xia can arrive at the Nanning government as soon as possible. If it's too late, I'm afraid that Bugnam of Gojosian won't be able to hold back and continue to mobilize his troops. If that happens, then no one can be blamed. That's enough. I've delivered the message, so I'm leaving. Assistant Minister Zhou, you can pack up and leave with the diplomatic group as soon as possible. Ba Daojiang didn't care about Zhou Xiang's reaction. After saying this, he turned around and left, leaving Zhou Xiang with his back to him. Zhou Xiang stood in the same place for more than 10 breaths. After pondering over Ba Daojiang's words, Zhou Xiang suddenly let out a scream. Then he shouted, "Hurry, hurry, pack up, we're leaving now, right now." In the three provinces' king's residence, Yang Chendong was talking to Yao Yingjun in the main hall. The entire Guangxi had become one of Xianxia's territories. Yunnan and Guizhou had begun to stabilize after more than a month of turmoil, so Yang Chendong had no need to stay here. After all, he wasn't Zhu Huiyun, nor was he the three provinces' king. In his eyes, there was only a palm-sized area. He called Yao Yingjun over to listen to his work report and the next step of the work plan. Fortunately, after more than a month of learning, Yao Yingjun had begun to adapt to his current work, and he was getting better and better at it day by day. In front of Yang Chendong, Yao Yingjun roughly explained the plans of the three provinces for the next few years. The main focus was on the migration of the people, distribution of land, and economic development. Chapter 16:16. In the process of listening to the report, Yang Chendong would add some of his own opinions from time to time. Yao Yingjun kept nodding as he listened and then took notes. Evidently, being able to hear Yang Chendong's direct teachings was something that all of the Xianxia officials were envious of. It took more than 2 hours for the report to be completed. At the end, Yao Yingjun looked at Yang Chendong and said, "Sixth young master, I have a request that I hope you can agree to." "What is it?" "Tell me." Yang Chendong thought that Yao Yingjun wanted financial support. After all, it was impossible to move without money. "Sixth young master, I would like to send my wife Zhu Lian to Xichen City. As you know, I will have a lot of work to do. I'm afraid that I won't have time to take care of my family in the near future, so..." How was this about not having time to take care of his family? Yao Yingjun was basically handing his family's weakness to Yang Chendong. Soon he would become a high-ranking official in the local government, a high-ranking official with real power in his hands. Moreover, he was so close to the Southern Ming dynasty. Who knew how many people would want his position and play tricks behind his back? In order to prevent Yang Chendong from suspecting him, Yao Yingjun decided to send his family to Xichen City. This way the trust level would be much higher. For Yao Yingjun to make such a decision, it was enough to prove that he was a smart person. Yang Chendong liked to interact with smart people. This way he could save a lot of effort. Of course, Yang Chendong was more concerned about old friendships. Ever since Yao Yingjun joined the Yang faction, he had been working in the secret battlefront. It was not easy for him to lead an army privately. Now that he had to send his family away in such a short time, it was too cruel for him. Yang Chendong didn't want to leave an impression that he couldn't tolerate or trust people. Therefore, when faced with Yao Yingjun's request, he only said after a moment of silence, "Zhu Lian doesn't need to go to Crimson City. She has lived here since she was young, and I'm afraid she won't be able to adapt to other places. Without you accompanying her, it would be even more boring. This young master doesn't want to break apart a couple, huh?" Yang Chendong actually refused. Although Yao Yingjun was happy, he was also anxious. This was the time for him to show his loyalty. He could not give up just because of Yang Chendong's rejection. Wouldn't that give others the impression that he was acting? More importantly, he would feel uneasy if he didn't reveal anything that could be used against him. At that time, he was afraid that there would only be other methods to monitor him. That would also be very uncomfortable. As such, Yao Yingjun decided to try again, saying, "Sixth young master, this subject has already discussed this with my wife and she has agreed." Alright, this young master can understand how you feel. However, Zhou Xian and you truly love each other, so it's best that you don't separate. Besides, you're tired from work and need someone to take care of you. How about this? Don't you have 2 children? Send them to Crimson City to study with this young master's princes and princesses. They'll have feelings for each other from a young age, and in the future, they'll be able to help them achieve greater things. Perhaps they'll be even more impressive than you, their father, huh? He had thought that Yang Qindong had rejected him because he had better methods to monitor him. However, after hearing this, Yao Yingjuan's tears immediately flowed out. Even though sending his 2 children to Crimson City was also a form of hostages. However, it was undeniable that this result was much better than sending Zhou Xian over. At least, as Yang Qindong had said, letting the children interact with each other would be very beneficial for the children's development in the future. Yang Qindong had already conquered a lot of land and there was no need to say anything more. His children would inherit a lot of the family business, and now that they had a good relationship with the future successors, many Xianxia generals hoped for this. Now that it had fallen on his head, it would be a lie if he wasn't emotional. Yang Qindong didn't like to see people cry, especially men crying in front of him, so he quickly waved his hand and said, "All right, wipe your tears. If you want to thank the young master, you have to do the work at hand well. If there's anything you can't solve, you can send a telegram at any time. If there's anything disobedient, you can execute it and report it. The young master will support you." This was equivalent to receiving an imperial edict. Yao Yingjun once again prostrated himself on the ground and shouted, "Long live the king." However, everyone knew that it wouldn't take long for this to become 10,000 years. At this time, Xianxia was so big that it had far surpassed the Great Ming. If Yang Qindong didn't become an emperor, the people below would probably be unhappy. Yao Yingjun left with a grateful expression, and it was time for Yang Qindong to leave Yunnan. Immediately, 2,000 black cavalry followed to protect them, and the Third Army's commander, Wuxia, personally led the troops to escort them. The group left Yunnan Prefecture and went straight to Nanning Prefecture. When Yang Qindong left the city, all the people in Yunnan Prefecture moved out. They came out of their own accord to send Yang Qindong off. It was because of this person's arrival that the people's lives had undergone earth-shaking changes. Not only did they no longer need to worry about war and personal safety, but everyone was also given a new piece of land and had a goal in life. This was something that many people had never dreamed of. Riding on the white dragon and looking at the scene of the people sending him off, Yang Qindong said emotionally to Yao Yingjun, who was sending him off, "Did you see that? Those who win the hearts of the people win the world. As long as the hearts of the people are there, there's nothing that can't be done. You local officials and officials must remember this." "Yes, this subject will remember." Yao Yingjun replied as if he had been taught something. Nanning Prefecture. Commander Tian, who was riding a horse outside the city. There were several teachers with him. They all knew that the 6th young master would visit Nanning Prefecture today. For this, not only did they clean up the city again, they also sent many cavalry to protect him. Today, the importance of Yang Qindong's safety was far greater than that of the Emperor of Southern Baiming. There were many Nanning people in the welcoming team. They stood on both sides of the road either out of curiosity or out of gratitude. Without the Wolf Fang special forces sent by Yang Qindong, all the people would have been killed by the cannons. Just based on this point, it was worth everyone coming out of the city to welcome Bugnam of Zhou Xian. There was another group of people in the crowd. There were many of them, about 1,000 people. They were wearing the Southern Ming official uniform that was somewhat out of place. They were the Southern Ming officials led by the Southern Ming Minister of Rights, Xiacheng. After Zhou Xian was allowed to leave Yunnan Prefecture, he rushed all the way to Guangzhou Prefecture and met the Minister of Rights, Xiacheng. After repeating the words of Ba Dao River, Xiacheng could no longer remain calm. He left Guangzhou Prefecture overnight and went straight to Nanning Prefecture. Xiacheng couldn't guess whether Yang Qindong would continue to send troops or not. However, he definitely couldn't allow the 5-star army to send troops because of him. If he really did that, he was afraid that the emperor would be furious. He only had one head and it wouldn't be enough to chop it off. After rushing for a while, he finally reached Nanning Prefecture before Yang Qindong. Xiacheng was smart enough not to enter the city. In order to express his attitude, he decided to wait here for Yang Qindong to enter the city first. Although it was said that Yang Qindong already had the intention of lowering his head, But thinking about it, Yang Qindong was Wunan Wang, who was recognized by the two emperors of the Great Ming Dynasty. It was not a big deal for a subject to be respectful to a king. Tian Hu and the others could understand why Xiachong would appear here. Especially when they saw that the Minister of Rights, who was so high and mighty, had to respectfully welcome their king at this moment, they felt even more honored. Didn't this also prove that the strength of the five-star army was constantly rising? As everyone was looking forward to it, a black shadow finally appeared in the distance. Then one after another the bright five-star army flag could be seen. It's Bugnam of Zhou Xian. Everyone line up. Tian Hu saw that the troops were getting closer and closer, so he hurriedly shouted. This time, because Division Commander Xiao Feng was in Laizhou Prefecture supervising the construction of the harbor, he didn't rush to Nanning Prefecture, as he became the boss here. If something went wrong, he would have to bear the main responsibility, so he couldn't help but be careful. Fortunately, the elite warriors of the world's #1 cavalry army were arranged everywhere, so safety shouldn't be a problem. About half an hour later, Yang Qindong's troops finally arrived in front of Nanning Prefecture's west gate. Tian Hu had already brought everyone to stand on both sides and saluted to welcome them. At the same time, his eyes were filled with excitement as he looked at Yang Qindong. Although they hadn't been apart for long. Without Yang Qindong's command, the world's #1 cavalry army seemed to have lost its soul and felt all kinds of uneasy. Now that they could fight side by side with the 6th young master, of course everyone was excited. You've all worked hard. Yang Qindong, who was riding on the white dragon, returned a military salute when he arrived in front of Tian Hu and the others. Then his gaze seemed to intentionally look in Xiachong's direction, but he ignored him and entered the city accompanied by Tian Hu and the others. In a distant corner, Vice Envoy Zhou Xian said excitedly, Bugnam of Zhou Xian saw us, he saw us. I know. What are you shouting for? What are you doing? Xiachong also saw this scene, but he wasn't very excited. On the contrary, he felt that Yang Qindong cared about ignoring him, which made him feel very uncomfortable. However, when he thought about how his strength was inferior, what else could he do besides lowering his head? Finally, Yang Qindong, who was surrounded by people, entered the city. Xiachong also tidied up his clothes and prepared to enter the city. Just now, not only did he see Bugnam of Zhou Xian and Yang Qindong, but he also saw the might of the world's #1 cavalry army. It had to be said that this cavalry army not only had a large number of people, but they were also skilled in horse riding. Under their control, all the war horses didn't make any sound, and none of the war horses jumped out of the formation, which was very terrifying. Chapter 16-17. It must be known that these were livestock, not humans. To be able to make them so obedient, it must have taken a lot of effort. Based on this, it could be seen that this cavalry was not ordinary. Xiachong, who had learned riding and archery, had his own horse. He still remembered that it took a long time to tame it. In the end, he was only able to ride it. He could not reach the level of familiarity with it like the cavalry in front of him. Even a single horse could not do this, let alone so many war horses. From this point, this was an army that was not easy to deal with. Coincidentally, in the entire southern Ming army, there were no decent cavalry. Due to the environment, the 2.5 million soldiers of the southern Ming army were almost all infantrymen. Comparing them, wasn't it obvious who was superior? Thus, Xiachong had a rough understanding of the strength of the 5-star army. In his heart, he was thinking that it would be better if he could negotiate. As long as Bugnam of Zhou Xian's request was not too excessive. So what if he satisfied him? After all, if they really fought, the southern Ming army's chances of winning were too low. Yang Qindong naturally did not know that the world's #1 cavalry army's formation to welcome him would scare Xiachong. After he entered the city, he stationed himself in the largest courtyard in the city. This was a place that Tian Hu specially prepared for Yang Qindong to rest. The courtyard was very clean. There was a rockery, a garden, and a pond. The environment looked very good. You are considerate. After Yang Qindong roughly looked around the courtyard, he nodded to Tian Hu in satisfaction. Then he said, "Go and arrange it. Let the southern Ming envoy come and see me." At this point, Yang Qindong did not intend to continue fighting with the southern Ming army. Since they were not fully prepared, they would stop fighting first. Of course, since he had the upper hand, he needed to ask for some benefits. He was also confident that the southern Ming army would agree to his request. Because compared to him, the other side was not prepared for war. Not fighting. Tianhu was shocked. After all, for a battlefield-killing god like him, if there was no war, it would not reflect their value. After asking this question, Tianhu was somewhat regretful. He should not have questioned such a big matter. Although he was Yang Qindong's student and was now the famous commander of the world's #1 cavalry army, there were some things that he could not ask. On the contrary, Yang Qindong did not show any dissatisfaction. Let's see what the Southern Ming Empire's attitude is first. After all, everyone here is Han. It's best if we don't fight. To be able to give such an answer, Tianhu was already very satisfied. Then he said, Tianhu's #1 cavalry. Although Yang Qindong had been the Bugnam of Gozhouzian for more than 10 years, he was still unable to adapt to his current role. Therefore he gave such an answer to Tianhu's question. If it was the two emperors of the southern Baiming or Zhu Huihua, they would definitely not answer this question. Tianhu moved quickly and quickly sent people to find Xiachong and the others in the city. Then he led them to Yang Qindong's temporary residence. In the main hall, both sides were able to meet. Facing Xiachong, Yang Qindong could not be so casual. He first sat on the main chair in the main hall. When Xiachong appeared, the other party could only look up to see him. Southern Ming Ministry of Rights Minister Xiachong greets Bugnam of Gozhouzian. Ministry of Rights Left Assistant Minister Zhou Xian greets Bugnam of Gozhouzian. Dispense with the formalities. Yang Qindong raised his hand and said with a calm expression. Then, without saying anything, he asked directly, Both of you, I heard that you are here to negotiate on behalf of the Southern Ming Imperial Court. What are your rules? Why don't you tell me everything? Xiachong was obviously not used to Yang Qindong's straightforward way of opening. Shouldn't both sides talk about their daily lives and friendship first before talking about business? Now he was asking about the other party's trump card. Anyone with a bit of common sense in negotiations would not ask such a question. Did Yang Qindong not know how to negotiate? Of course not. Yang Qindong's political wisdom was not low. The reason why he said this was to create pressure on the other party and let them know that the initiative of the negotiation was in his hands. The use of the word negotiation made it even more obvious that the Yang faction and the Southern Ming Empire were on equal footing. It wasn't a matter of who was the subordinate of the other. Otherwise there would not be such a term. Xiachong was not used to Yang Qindong's rhythm and method. For a moment he did not know what to say. Yang Qindong deliberately frowned. What? Did this prince misunderstand? You are not here to negotiate but to declare war? All right, this prince understands your intentions. Please go back now. Please also tell the Southern Ming Emperor that we will meet on the battlefield. Come, send the guests out. Yes. Beta Persei at the side immediately said and prepared to step out. This action gave Xiachong a fright. Although some words were easy to say and unpleasant to hear, he really was here to negotiate on behalf of the Southern Ming Empire. Especially before the Southern Ming Empire was ready for war, it was better not to fight this war. And if the war continued because of him, the emperor would not be appeased even if he was killed. No, Bugnam of Gozhouzian misunderstood. We are indeed here to negotiate. Xiachong knew that he could not continue pretending. In order to complete his mission, he had no choice but to lower his head at this moment. From the moment he said this, it also proved that he recognized Xianxia and the Southern Ming Empire as existences on the same level. Alright, then tell me your thoughts. Yang Qindong wanted this kind of rhythm. Facing the somewhat aggressive Yang Qindong, Xiachong found that the words he prepared before could not be used. For example, the words that insisted that Yang Qindong was still a subject of the Great Ming Empire could not be said. This was because the other party was not afraid of war at all. On the contrary, he was the one who was afraid of war. However, there were still some words that needed to be said. Under Yang Qindong's guidance, Xiachong opened his mouth. Prince Bugnam of Gozhouzian, Emperor Ingzong's intention is to allow you to establish a new power outside of the Southern Ming Empire. The Southern Ming Empire's imperial court will recognize the existence of this new power. However, the current Yunnan, Guizhou and Guangxi must be returned to the Southern Ming Empire. This includes the captured Shiping King Mu Bin, Sanxing King Zhu Huifu and the others. Also, enough. Just by listening to the beginning, Yang Chendong knew that the Southern Ming Empire did not see how powerful he was. At this moment they were still holding on to unrealistic fantasies. Did they really think that he was just a king with a different surname and did not dare to fall out with the Southern Ming Empire? Yang Chendong did not make a move now because he was not fully prepared. He did not want more Han people to lose their homes and lives because of war. This was not because he was afraid. On the contrary, if he was really angered, even if he made a move now, he could guarantee that he would win this war. Moreover, the 5-star army would definitely obtain the final victory. At most, he would have to pay a higher price and more Han people would die. It was because he considered the safety of the civilians that Yang Chendong decided to temporarily stop advancing. However, this did not mean that he was afraid. If Zhou Xian had such thoughts, then there was no need for this peace talk. Xia Chong's expression turned a little ugly when he was rejected after just 2 sentences. However, considering that the 5-star army was at its peak, he suppressed the anger in his heart and said, "However, I wonder what Bugnam of Gozhouxian's intentions are?" This prince's intentions? It's very simple. As long as the Southern Ming Empire agrees to these requests, our Xianxia army will stop advancing and guarantee that we will not invade. Oh? This lowly official is willing to listen to Bugnam of Gozhouxian's intentions. Hearing that the 5-star army would stop advancing, Xiachong was also interested. As for the so-called conditions, there was nothing to lose by listening to it first, right? Moreover, since you have brought up the conditions, we can discuss them later. Let's not talk about whether we can come to an agreement or not. At least there was one point that could be delayed for a while. As such, under the gazes of Xiachong and Zhou Xian, Yang Chendong opened his mouth. This war was originally planned by your Southern Ming Empire. Don't deny it. If it wasn't for your tacit approval, Zhu Huichu wouldn't have had the guts to attack my Liangshan. Sheeping King Mu Bin wouldn't have sent his men to kill this prince without orders and then personally led his troops to attack this prince. Also, the cannons used to attack this prince were also transported from your Southern Ming kingdom, right? This should be enough to prove everything. All along, this prince has scrupulously abided by the duties of a subject. Even if the 5-star army was extremely powerful and wiped out all the foreign races around the Great Ming Empire, this prince still respected the Great Ming Empire greatly. Not only did this prince not have the intention to attack, but this prince also provided large amounts of food to the imperial court. Furthermore, the price was so low that this prince had to use money to subsidize it. However, on the other hand, how did you treat this prince? Blindly wanting to kill this prince. Speaking of this, it really makes one's heart cold. Although it is said that if the ruler wants the subject to die, the subject has no choice but to die, this prince has done so many things for the Great Ming Empire. Even back then at the Timu Castle, if this prince did not make a move, Ingzong would have already met with disaster. Since this is the case, this prince has already done his duty as a subject. Now that the ruler wants to kill this prince, then this prince will live for himself this time. When these words entered Xiachong's ears, he couldn't help but lower his head. Many of the things that Yang Chendong had accused the Southern Ming Empire of were true. If they really wanted to make a fuss about it, then the Southern Ming Empire had indeed let down Yang Chendong. This was because all along Xianxia had always been the party that paid the price, and the Southern Ming Empire was the party that received benefits. However, the result now was that Yang Chendong had to die. This was too much of a bully. If Xiachong had Yangxia's powerful strength, he would probably not be able to resist jumping up and opposing the Southern Ming Empire. Chapter 16-18. Since Xiachong did not speak, Zhou Xian was even more speechless. It was clear that they were the weaker side in this negotiation. Even if the peace talks ended, the Southern Ming Empire would only suffer losses. Even so, no matter who initiated the negotiations, the emperor would not be satisfied. At this time there was no way to hide. Who would take the initiative to charge forward? Since the envoy and deputy did not speak, Yang Chendong continued, "Even if you are not benevolent, this prince cannot be unjust. After all, this is a place where the Han people live. This prince is also a Han official. If this prince does not have to use military force, this prince is unwilling to use it. However, this prince must give an explanation for the previous matter. This is also an explanation for this prince and the officials under this prince. Thus, I will raise the following conditions. First, the Southern Ming Empire must recognize Xianxia's legal authority over Yunnan, Guizhou and Guangxi. These territories were taken from Zhou Xian by this prince. It was also because of Zhou Huiyun's request that I went to Southern Yun Manor. Now that the development has been settled, there must be an explanation. Second, other than Guangdong's Lijiao Manor, the Southern Ming Empire also needs to open up Chaozhou Manor, Fuzhou Manor, Taizhou Manor, Ningbo Manor, Songjiang Manor and Huayan Manor. Our Xianxia can build a military port there. Of course, the sovereignty of these places will still belong to the Southern Ming Empire. Our Xianxia is also willing to pay some rent. Third, as a fellow Han, this prince will definitely not watch the Han people suffer. If the Southern Ming Empire's policies or the officials do not care for the people, causing some people to want to leave the Southern Ming Empire for our Xianxia, the Southern Ming Empire will not stop them. We should respect the people's choice. If someone tries to stop them, then I, Xianxia, will reserve the right to send troops to rescue them. Fourth, Xianxia is willing to continue trading with the Southern Ming Empire. However, the Southern Ming Empire must guarantee the safety of the Xianxia merchants. If something happens to them, Xianxia will also reserve the right to send troops to rescue them. Fifth, for the prosperity of trade, Xianxia is permitted to open banks in the Southern Ming Empire. Of course, we will pay the taxes that should be paid on time. However, if someone has designs on the bank, then we will also protect the right to rescue them. Sixth, due to the bad weather this year, the grain harvest in the Xianxia region is poor, and the price of grain will increase by 30%. In some remote areas, the price of grain may increase by 40% to 50%. I hope that the Southern Ming Imperial Court can understand this. After all, the price of rations will be higher if there is less. This kind of thing has happened many times. 7. Xianxia is willing to have more exchanges with the Southern Ming Empire. After the various ports are built, Xianxia will have specialized passenger ships to open up the waterway from Xi'an City to the Southern Ming Empire. At that time, if the Southern Ming Empire is willing to send people to Xi'an City for inspection, they can apply first. After they pass the inspection, they can enter Xianxia's land to study and learn. 8. Xianxia. Yang Qindong already had a draft in his mind. Things came out of his mouth one after another, and his requests also increased. Hearing this, Xiachong could not help but break out in cold sweat. As for the specific terms of the negotiation, it still needed to be analyzed word by word. However, after hearing this, Xiachong already knew one thing. That was, from this moment onwards, the Southern Ming Empire and Xianxia were no longer subordinate to each other, although they were not in the past. However, from this moment onwards, the two sides were on equal footing. Yang Qindong's ambition had already been exposed. However, even if this was the case, what could Xiachong say? Could he say that he did not agree? Could he say that the Southern Ming Empire would send an army to teach the five-star army how to behave? If he could not do this, then it was better not to mention it. The situation was stronger than the person, and the fist was not as strong as the person. If he still wanted to reason with the other party, that was not courage but stupidity. After nearly half an hour, Yang Qindong roughly explained his requests. Then he looked at Xiachong's pale face and said, "This is only the preliminary negotiation outline that this king has drafted. As for the specific matters, I, Xia's foreign affairs chief, will discuss it with Minister Xia. You can also send this general request back to the Southern Ming Empire's capital, so that the emperor will know first. However, there is one thing that this king wants to make clear. The Southern Ming Empire must agree to the above conditions. Otherwise, the Southern Ming Empire will be seen as insincere. Next, just treat it as self-protection. The iron cavalry of the five-star army will not stop moving forward. At that time, don't say that I, Yang Qindong, did not take into account the relationship between the monarch and his subjects. Okay, Beta Persei, send the guests off." The tall Beta Persei immediately stepped forward and said to Xiachong and Zhou Xian expressionlessly, "Two sirs, please." If that's the case, this official will take his leave. Xiachong also knew that there was no point in arguing at this moment. Rather than that, it was better to immediately write a memorial to inform the imperial court of Yang Qindong's request. As for what to do next, it was a matter between the emperor and the imperial court. He could no longer interfere. Xiachong and Zhou Xian finally left. At the back of the main hall, a similarly sturdy middle-aged man walked in. His face was dignified without being angry. Just by looking at him one could feel a sense of ferocity. And he was Xianxia's foreign affairs chief, Ma Dali. Generally, as a diplomat they needed to look more amiable and friendly. This way they would be more acceptable and their words would be more resonant. However, Yang Qindong did the opposite. His foreign affairs chief looked more frightening, and only this could better intimidate some people. After all, the current Xianxia was incomparably powerful. The so-called negotiation ultimately depended on the strength of both sides. Otherwise, there wouldn't be the saying of weak countries having no diplomacy. It was precisely because they were strong enough that they needed to be tough in their diplomacy. This was something that Ma Dali did very well. He looked fierce, had a loud voice, and had a bad temper. He would often scold people if they didn't agree with him. However, it was this kind of life that was most suitable for the current Xianxia. This time, Ma Dali was transferred over from Resin City to play this role. It was to put pressure on the southern Ming Empire. Moreover, with Yang Qindong's current status, there were too many things that he needed to do. He wouldn't argue with the other party over something like negotiation. Ma Dali gladly accepted this task. Speaking of which, he could be considered an old member of Xianxia. He had been the foreign affairs chief for nearly 10 years. This didn't conform to the Xianxia's system of changing officials. However, no one said anything about this matter. Why was that? The reason was simple. Don't look at the Foreign Affairs Department's reputation. Because of the strength of the five-star army, they would often destroy a country if they didn't agree with them. As such, the Foreign Affairs Department often existed in name only. It wasn't of much use at all, and there wasn't much for them to negotiate with. Over time, the Foreign Affairs Department's authority was greatly reduced. Anyone with ambition was unwilling to become an official in the Foreign Affairs Department. After all, what was the difference between becoming an official in a useless department and retiring? Ma Dali was extremely depressed because of this. He didn't believe that the Foreign Affairs Department would have nothing to do. He was just waiting for an opportunity. Although he had been treated coldly over the years, he still didn't give up. He was waiting. This was because he had carefully analyzed that their king was an extreme racialist. This could be seen from the rising status of the Han people. With this kind of thinking they could deal with other foreign races in other countries, but only the Great Ming, which was the land of the Han, could not be so rashly sent out troops. Otherwise, it would definitely be a loss for the Han people. At this time, it was time for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to help. Ma Dali's thinking was right. As expected, a telegram was sent to the Foreign Affairs Department. Yang Qindong personally asked Ma Dali to bring a negotiation team to Nanning. When Ma Dali understood the deeper meaning behind this, he organized enough people to take a boat and arrived at Nanning before Yang Qindong. Just like before, he had heard the conversation between Yang Qindong, Xie Chong, and Zhou Xian. Now that he was angry, it was obvious that Yang Qindong wanted to hear his opinion. Previously, when he was hiding in the corner, he saw Xie Chong and Zhou Xian's actions. At this moment, Ma Dali spoke with great confidence. "Sixth young master, don't worry. I will do my best to ensure that the Great Ming agrees to all of our conditions." This king believes that you won't. Department head Ma, feel free to do whatever you want. Even if the negotiations fail, there is no need to be afraid. When the time comes, our cavalry will directly enter Guangdong. Yang Qindong didn't want to give Ma Dali any pressure, so he smiled and said. Yang Qindong was working with the idea of slowly encroaching on the Great Ming's political power. However, if the Great Ming didn't cooperate, then he would have to cut the Gordian knot and take the initiative to send troops. Although this way the losses would be greater, but it might not be a bad thing to take over the Great Ming sooner. Yes, this subject understands. Ma Dali was full of confidence when he heard this. With a powerful military backing, what was there to be afraid of? Ma Dali left confidently. Yang Qindong stretched and looked at Beta Persei, who had returned from sending the guests away. He smiled and said, "How is it? You've been out for so long. Do you miss Madam?" Hee. Beta Persei scratched his head and smiled embarrassedly. This cute side of him could only be shown in front of Yang Qindong. In front of others, he was the majestic Beta Persei who killed people like flies. "If you want to, then just say it. We have been out for more than 6 years. It's time to go back and take a look." When Beta Persei smiled, Yang Qindong already knew the answer and smiled as well. Over the years, Beta Persei had many women by his side when he was out on expeditions. Every time he captured a place, The powerful logistics department would organize the local women of different races to serve the 5-star army. At Beta Persei's level, the women who could be sent to his side were all beautiful women of different races. However, they were still not as good as his wife at home. Can we really go back? This little one, I really miss my children. Beta Persei smiled. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.